Her Rogue Russian, Karev Brothers, Book 2. Written by Leslie North. Read by D.C. Cole. 1. Maxim. Maxim Karev leaned against the bars of his holding cell, propping his forearms on the cross pieces and allowing his hands to dangle on the free side of the world. His intuition told him that it was a risky position to put himself in, but he doubted if anyone watching him was stupid enough to wrap him with a nightstick. He found the best way to pass the time was to people watch. His eyes traveled up the negligible length of the male arresting officer, taking in the other's short stature, shaved head, and ordinary face with some satisfaction. Anything to feel the superior in their situation. The other man was built rangy, like a runner, and muscled like one of those jointed wooden dolls. He'd heard his name when they entered the precinct together. Andrews. He could take Andrews in a fair fight. Andrews was deficient to Maxim in both looks and size, and probably in other areas of his life, although Maxim didn't really want to imagine what he was like in the bedroom. The next officer who entered the cell block, on the other hand. "Tom." The woman who pushed through the door and strode toward Andrews was one of the most stunning creatures Maxim had ever seen in his life. He eased a little back from the bars of his cell to make himself less apparent as he studied her. She wore a fitted black pantsuit and conservative heels. Each sweep of her powerful legs implied the muscle tone beneath. Too bad he was prevented of full view by the pleated black pants she wore. Her pale blouse was unbuttoned at the top, the skin beneath several tones warmer than the starched material that perfectly and professionally concealed the shape of her breasts. One open button down her collar was agony, but two felt like inhumane torture to Maxim. He tried to pay more attention to the credentials hanging off her lanyard, but those also seemed to be hidden inside her shirt. Her hair, thick, lush, and loose, faded seamlessly from brunette to blonde at its tips. "Like the new hair, Savannah," Tom Andrews commented. The female agent, Savannah, rolled her eyes at the ill-timed flirtation. Maxim found that he liked her already. "Is that him?" Her gaze hunted down the cell block before locking on to its intended target. Maxim met her stare evenly, feeling privately impressed when she didn't look away. "Is that the Karev?" "Who else would a guy who looks like that be?" Tom replied. Savannah held Maxim's eyes a moment longer before turning her back to him. Tom Andrews turned with her, and they continued their discussion in private. It maddened Maxim that he couldn't know for a fact what they were saying, although he thought it was easy enough to guess. He had never had a direct run-in with a law like this when he was heading security for the Mafia. It was only in the wake of his father's murder that the feds had thought to find a reason to bring him in. It wasn't looking good, but at least the sexy agent was gazing at him again. "Mr. Karev," she addressed him directly this time. Agent Andrews moved off to give them some room as Savannah advanced down the cell block toward him. Maxim fit his face against the bars and greeted her with a charmed smile, letting her know with his eyes just how much he appreciated that it was her joining him. "Please, call me Maxim." He let his voice retain its natural authoritative cadence, deep and smooth despite his superficial greeting. "Mr. Karev is my father." "Was your father," Savannah stated, confirming what he had already guessed. Now that he knew for certain what this was about, he let his smile dwindle off, though the intensity of his gaze on her never changed. He needed to figure out her angle before she found a way to keep him here overnight. He did not like being confined, especially considering he had managed to escape arrest for all the years he had actually been a criminal. "Thank you for your condolences," he replied. "I'm not here to play games, Mr. Karev, and I'm not here to mourn the dead. We need to talk." "How about you start mourning my taillight? Your man owes me a new one." "I beg your pardon?" Savannah asked. Maxim shifted his weight, bringing his body closer to the bars, but Savannah didn't seem to notice or care. The woman must have felt secure in the fact that he wouldn't harm her, if not in the structural safety of the enclosure between them. "The beat cop who busted it," Maxim explained. "I saw one of your uniformed goons sniffing around my Nighthawk when I was parked out on the street the other day. I take good care of my bikes, Miss Casiero. Agent Savannah Casiero," she enunciated for him. I'd offer you my hand to shake, but I'm guessing you'd break it. Your guess is as good as mine, Maxim. He let a beat pass between them while he processed the way she said his name. No trace of an accent, though he could clearly see she was of Hispanic heritage. She made even a pantsuit look exotic, but he couldn't let himself forget what it really was. Armor, a symbol of her station. They were at war, and he was behind enemy lines. "I'd rather you break my wrist than my bike," he said finally as he drew back from the bars. "So, when can I expect that taillight to be replaced, Savannah? And can I expect an apology for getting picked up under false pretenses?" Her eyes flickered down the hall in the direction Agent Andrews had disappeared. "I wouldn't know anything about that." "Not sure if I believe you." "Then believe me when I say I'm just here to talk." She crossed her arms and settled them comfortably beneath her breasts. Maxim noted the way her cleavage deepened when she did so, but thought it wasn't an interrogation tactic. Savannah Casiero seemed too professional to stoop to using her sexuality to benefit her negotiations. At least, he didn't think she would stoop to it here. He would file that fantasy away for another, less pressing time. "I know what you're here to talk about," Maxim stated. It had been several months since his father's murder. Sergei Karev had been discovered lying face down in his office with an ice pick buried between his shoulder blades. In life, Maxim's father had enjoyed one of the highest positions in the Russian Mafia. Maxim doubted if this was news to the FBI. Dancing around the subject now would only prolong his stay behind bars, but he couldn't be too careful when it came to revealing his cards, even if it felt like he had been dealt a low hand in a game where the rules were decidedly not in his favor. There were those who thought he was responsible for his father's murder, some of whom he suspected could be numbered among his own family. While his youngest brother, Vlad, hadn't made the accusation outright, Maxim knew his brother thought he was involved somehow. Judging by the measuring quality of Agent Casiero's look, she might think so too. "Then let's talk," she stated. She surprised Maxim by pulling her lanyard from beneath her shirt and flashing it before a sensor set into the wall. Apparently, she had the proper clearance, because the cell door slid open, swift and noiseless on its track. Maxim concealed his surprise and followed the agent into an interrogation room across the hall. Savannah closed the door behind them. "Coffee?" she offered him as Maxim took a seat. "Sure," he said. He wasn't going to turn down an overture. If the agent was trying to get prints off him to run later, then she was in for a disappointing lab result. He had burned them off caustically when he became head of security for the mob. "I take it black." "Of course you do." Savannah exited through a door adjacent to the first and came back with 2 steaming styrofoam cups. Maxim noted she took her own coffee as warm and caramel-colored as her skin. She set his in front of him, dropped down into the chair across from him, and sighed. "I know you didn't murder your father." This time, Maxim was unable to master his surprise. Some of the coffee splashed out of his cup, and he hissed and drew his hand back. "What?" He shot her a suspicious look. "Explain." "Let's just say that speaking to people with your resume isn't a part of my usual description. I'm involved with the Blood Diamond Task Force." Savannah leaned in a little, and Maxim found himself about to unconsciously mirror her. She was good, intelligent, approachable, charismatic. She was the sort of woman you wanted to impart your secrets to, late at night, when you were alone together between the sheets, just you and her. Maxim leaned back in his chair, propping his arm casually atop the sloped metal frame. "I believe that whoever perpetrated your father's murder is linked to a smuggling operation we've been tracking," Savannah continued. "Can you offer any insight into this?" "Not without a lawyer, I can't." "I'd prefer it if we kept things just between us." Savannah's mouth twisted in a little confidential smile, and her dark eyes sparked. Oh, she was very good. But Maxim wasn't just some muscle the mob hired to flex for them once upon a time. He knew how to play the game. "Sure you don't want to invite your friend in?" he offered, taking a casual sip of his coffee. "Andrews, was it? Looked like the 2 of you could light a fire." Savannah pulled a face. It was a micro-expression, there and gone in a flash. But either the coffee was too strong, or she had no real taste for Agent Tom Andrews. As much as I find that mental image interesting, Mr. Karev, Agent Andrews has agreed to keep his hands to himself for the time being. Maxim snorted. We'll see about that. Tom Andrews struck him as the obnoxiously persistent type. So, what is this? I assume the Bureau hasn't come into any new evidence substantial enough to hold me here. I would say my rights were being infringed upon if I wasn't so curious about your bottom line. My bottom line is I want to find your father's killer as much as you do, Savannah stated. Or at least as much as I think you do. Watching you toil away in that bike shop day in and day out doesn't exactly inspire confidence. Maxim bristled. If my life is so boring, then maybe you should quit surveilling it and leave me the hell alone. Savannah shook her head. I didn't mean any offense, but I need to know just how committed you are to finding your father's murderer. You've been out of the Bratva for a while, Maxim. How many years has it been? 3? Maxim said nothing. Now, I'm asking you how willing you are to go back in. Savannah pushed a file across the table to him. He studied it from afar without bothering to open it. You want me to go undercover for you? He guessed. You want me to rejoin the Russian Mafia? Savannah shook her head again. No, I want you to validate my cover. The Bureau's proposal is fully outlined in the— I'd rather hear it from you, Maxim said point blank. What exactly is it that you want? Savannah eyed him over the rim of her cup. Then she lowered it, tapping it thoughtfully on the edge of the table. I want you on the outside. I think you're more useful to us that way, and rest assured I'm the only one in the department who thinks that. That's it? He held her gaze. Savannah didn't back down. I want to shut these smugglers down, and I want to catch a murderer, she admitted finally. If you really have nothing to hide, then I want what you want. You agree to assist me, to assist my organization, rather, and I agree to help you clear your name. Otherwise, you can look forward to sitting behind bars for any number of offenses, legitimate or otherwise. She raised the cup once more to conceal the patient line of her lips. I have no control over what the other teams do or what means they implement to achieve their own ends. You might be looking at a lot of broken taillights in your future. Her eyes flashed. But I can assure you that by sticking with me and my team, I'll ensure our interests always align. As much as we might be fed the same line over and over again from elementary school on, it isn't innocent until proven guilty in the real world, Maxim. I think you know that. I also think you're smart enough to realize that you're headed for the chopping block. Word on the street is you're everyone's prime suspect these days. So, it's either work within your shitty system, or let the system work me, Maxim summarized. That about right? That's about right. He mulled her offer over for longer than was strictly necessary. She wasn't really giving him much of a choice, only the illusion of making a decision. They both knew what his answer had to be. So, what? He leaned in against the table, mirroring her posture with crossed arms. I go back in? It won't be easy, but I'm not saying I can't do it. What's your role in all this? I'm your girlfriend, Savannah Casiero stated simply. I don't do girlfriends, Maxim replied. You misunderstand me, Karev. Agent Casiero leaned in until the gold leaf ends of her hair trailed on the surface of the table. I don't care if you're gay, straight, or attracted to the two-wheeled death machine you rode in on. The minute you leave this room, you and I are going steady, and I dare you to do better. All things considered, Maxim thought that was a dare he just might be willing to take. 2. Savannah. Slick Cycles lived up to its name. Between the postmodern reception room and the open floor plan of the workshop/garage, Savannah couldn't deny that she felt more than a little bit impressed by the operation. The receptionist led her out onto the main floor, heels clicking a competent staccato on the oil-stained concrete. Both garage doors were flung wide open, as much to let the midday breeze in as to vent the smell of cleaning chemicals and exhaust. Sunlight filtered down naturally from the trio of skylights above, bathing the floor in luminous golden strips that Savannah and her escort passed through on the way to the back. An old radio blared classic rock on one of the workbenches. The receptionist had to shout to be heard above it. "Here's where the men do most of their work. If you're interested in browsing some of the models we have for sale, I can give you a tour of the showroom, if you like," the other woman suggested cheerfully. Savannah smiled. "Thanks for the offer, but I'm here to see Maxim. He told me he was working today." "Really?" The receptionist paused as Savannah continued to look around, eyes hunting the room for any sign of life. "He didn't mention he was expecting a visitor." "I doubt he knew I was coming by today." The door to the back of the shop pulled open, and in walked Maxim Karev in all his glory. He looked like he hadn't shaved since their interview a few days earlier. He was in the company of another man. They laughed as they traded a water bottle between them, evidently just coming back from a break they had taken outside. Maxim looked completely at ease, and completely in his element here. It was a marked contrast to the restrained, dangerous man Savannah had first met behind bars a few days previous. Then he had been like a caged predator, lightning in a bottle just waiting to go off. It was obvious that captivity not only fit him like an ill-tailored suit, but stood as a bruise to his ego. She supposed she couldn't blame him for feeling that way, not when he had done the admirable thing and cut ties with his criminal roots years earlier, or so he claimed. Maxim's gaze landed on the two women, and he paused. The other man didn't notice them as quickly. He continued gabbing as Savannah felt the world of the garage close in around her. Maxim Karev looked so good, it almost hurt. Today he was clad in black denim and a work-stained white t-shirt, wearing the thick, worn boots she remembered from the last time they'd met. The dark stubble on his chiseled jaw had worked its way into a full-blown beard. Savannah, who was never one to exactly go in for the clean-shaven look of her male coworkers, was having a hard time not noticing, or privately appreciating, just how well his lapsed hygiene suited him. She was having an even more difficult time reconciling the man standing before her with the one she had read about in the Bureau's expansive file on the Karev family. "This woman is here to see you, Max," the receptionist explained, sharing a conspicuous look with the other man. Savannah didn't understand the meaning of their silent exchange, but she was certain she would learn soon enough. "Yes? Can I help you?" Maxim asked her. He was being overly formal, likely just using a tactic to throw her off, but she knew the look he was giving her was appreciative. Today, she had traded in her usual pantsuit for a loose-fitting t-shirt with a wide oblong collar. She knew she had a good neck for it, and Maxim's eyes on her exposed clavicle told her he knew as well. "Hey, Max," Savannah parroted the nickname she had heard the receptionist use and waved eagerly at him, smiling so widely it hurt her jaw. "I know you didn't want to wait for that next date, so I figured I'd save you the trouble of tracking me down. Are you on a break?" "Sure he is," answered the man who had entered beside Maxim. He exchanged another significant look with the receptionist, this time more amused than astonished. "Couldn't wait for another date, huh? Can't say I blame him." The man strode forward and extended his hand, and Savannah noticed the wedding ring on his finger. "Travis Hammersmith. Maybe Maxim told you differently when you guys first met, but I actually own Slick Cycles." Savannah shook his hand, firm but not too firm. "He mentioned he was in a managerial position on his dating profile," she lied, widening her eyes as Maxim's conspicuously narrowed over Travis's shoulder. "I guess I did assume he was the owner." "Dating profile?" The receptionist burst out laughing before quickly raising a hand to cover her mouth. "Oh, I'm sorry. I know relationships are much more digital these days. I'm Rebecca, by the way. Travis is my husband." This time, the woman offered Savannah a beatific smile, genuine in its warmth, and for a moment she looked nothing like the competent professional Savannah had first met seated behind the desk. She looked almost as if she considered the two of them friends already. "Gonna take you up on that break extension now," Maxim interrupted the three of them by shouldering past Travis and wrapping his hand around Savannah's bicep. Normally, she would have judo thrown him any number of ways for grabbing hold of her so aggressively, but she was the only one who knew just how much pressure he was exerting, and she wouldn't be the one to outwardly give the game away. Without another word, he led her out the back door, then half-flung her away from him again as soon as they were out of sight of the others. If Savannah stumbled, she was easily able to regain her balance and turn, wearing a slightly bemused look at his rough treatment. "What was that bullshit about a dating profile?" Maxim growled at her. "If you want to convincingly pull this off to people who know me best, at least do your research first." "Hey, you started it by pretending not to know me," Savannah pointed out. "I figured we were improvising here. I came here to talk to you about our cover story, and however you want to come up with one is fine." It was another lie, of course. Savannah hated being out of control, and she hated the fact that Maxim already seemed to guess as much about her. Better to play it off now so he felt less inclined to use it against her in the future. "And I did do my research, hotshot." She stepped closer and thrust her finger into his chest. Maxim glanced down past his bristly chin as if he couldn't believe she would risk it. "Surveillance tells me you do go out with women. A lot of women. So it makes sense that we would have met online. I never and will never have a profile on a fucking date site," Maxim said as he grasped her finger and drew it away from him. "You do now, actually," Savannah stated, "on several websites." "What?" She shrugged, trying not to betray just how much she was enjoying watching him squirm. "Andrew set it up for me. He's the kind of guy who knows all about that sort of thing, you know? Anyway, I figured it might come up, but I couldn't be sure. Just know that you're dealing with professionals, and we've got every angle of a potential backstory covered." "Unbelievable!" Maxim turned away from her, running the flat of his palm down the full length of his face. "Hey, if I knew it would distress you this much, well, I probably wouldn't have changed anything," Savannah admitted. "But that's what I came by to talk to you about today. Since you're on board with going undercover together—" "Not like I had a choice," Maxim interjected. "Then we need to take this team up on a test run," Savannah finished, folding her lean arms across her chest in a show of patience. He could continue to resist the terms of their arrangement as much as he wanted, so long as he only groused about it in private. "Protocol demands that we go on a date together, Karev. Not only will this give us the opportunity to see how well we can work with one another under public scrutiny, but one or more sightings of us together will add credence to our relationship once we get you back inside the mob." Maxim made no response to this, opting instead to stare off across the back lot in stormy silence. Savannah softened her stance, only by a few degrees, and maneuvered around to face him once more. "So, what do you think?" she asked. "How about we get that taillight fixed and ride over to that 5-star Russian restaurant? What's it called? Ivana?" She knew full well what the name of the restaurant was, and may or may not have already called in a favor to ensure they could get a reservation there. It was the same place Madison had allowed herself to be taken on her first date with Maxim's younger brother, Vlad. To her surprise, Maxim shook his head. "No, we're too likely to get noticed there by those who would report back to the Brava, if not by active members of the Mafia themselves. You want to start small on our first outing together, then you need to think of someplace else." "Fine. I can see that you don't feel like suggesting anything, not that it matters," Savannah concluded. "What about the art museum? I know someone who can get us in for free." "I suggest you reread your dossier on me," Maxim returned flatly. "That's not a place I would take you." "Who says you're the one taking me?" Savannah asked, trying to keep her mounting impatience from bleeding through. Maxim shrugged. "It's what would be expected." Before Savannah could ask for clarity on whose expectations they would be living up to, the Russian lifted his arm to check the face of his watch. "Break's over. You'll have to come back some other time to discuss, but right now I need to get back to work." "Fine. Just know that Sergei's murderer probably doesn't give a shit about your work schedule," Savannah whispered fiercely as she followed him back inside the garage. "And the longer this takes, the better chance he or she has of escaping scot-free. The trail's already gone cold on our investigation, and that's why we need to inject someone like you into the proceedings to relight the fire. If I wanted to spend time pulling teeth, I would have become a fucking dentist." Maxim's face remained a steely, impassioned mask throughout her heated diatribe. She had no way of knowing if she had hit a nerve. Not until they both re-entered the receptionist's office and found Travis and Rebecca poring over a date book together. "Savannah and I were just discussing the possibility of a double date," Maxim said without segue, as if he hadn't quite remembered the name for it until the last minute. Rebecca exchanged a delighted look with Travis. "Perfect timing," she said cheerily. "The two of us just came available tonight." "It wouldn't hurt business for the three of us to close up shop on Saturday," Travis mused as he leaned over his wife's shoulder. "Sorry, 4, he amended quickly, as if afraid he might have insulted Savannah by already excluding her. "He's not used to counting that high," Rebecca apologized. "It's always just been the 3 of us. Oh, this will be so much fun." Savannah was feeling quite differently about things on the inside. In one fell swoop, Maxim had both managed to submit to her demands and completely upend them by inviting 2 others along. "Are you testing me?" She fixed her eyes on the tall Russian without trying to appear too much like she was glaring. Not that she cared about being graded, but it would certainly make things difficult moving forward if the Hammersmiths didn't approve of Maxim's new relationship. The Karev was a loner since he had broken with his family, and it was clear his circle of friendships didn't extend far, and that was the way he liked it. At the same time, it made getting to know and endear herself to those closest to him all the more imperative. "Where should we go?" Rebecca wondered out loud as she revolved in her chair to face her computer screen. She poised her hand over the mouse, ready to employ her behind-the-desk powers for the greater good. "Any happening happy hours tonight? Or did you guys already have an idea?" "How about paint and pint?" Savannah interjected suddenly. Rebecca's eyes lit up instantly as the men exchanged uncertain glances. "What?" Maxim asked the 2 of them. "Paint and pint," Rebecca stressed. "It's like one of those adult painting classes where they serve wine, only this place caters more toward mixed-sex company by offering beer as well. I think it's a great idea," she added, shooting a quick look Savannah's way. Clearly, she understood who her ally was in that moment. "I'm down," Travis offered. "Sounds like a blast." "I would say we have ourselves a date then," Savannah confirmed. She grinned and looped her arms around Maxim's bicep, going for instinctive and informal, and was mildly surprised when he didn't pull away from her. Her surprise was compounded when she felt her heartbeat speed a little in her chest, its arrhythmic pounding drumming against the trunk of the Russian's arm, which had been nestled between her breasts. He glanced down at her, disguising his own surprise with a veiled look of amusement, or so Savannah suspected. He couldn't feel the racing of her pulse like she could, right? Maybe she was only imagining or misattributing the look. This was their first outward display of affection after all, and she personally thought they totally nailed it, especially when she heard Rebecca's little lamentation of, "Aw." "I'd pick you up, but my taillight's still broken," Maxim said, effectively killing the moment between them. "You don't mind calling a cab, do you?" "Not at all," Savannah replied, coolly extracting herself from around his arm. "You don't mind showering up first, do you? Looks like you've been working hard today." Maxim snorted at the underhanded dig, and Savannah had to fight very hard to conceal the smile that threatened to give the game away when the others didn't appear to notice the subtext of their conversation. "If a little sweat bothers you, Savannah, then you better hope things don't go as well as I think they will tonight," Maxim murmured, loud enough for everyone else to hear. "I take back the awe," Rebecca said. "You guys keep it to yourselves." "No promises," Maxim said as Savannah turned to depart Slick Cycles with a little wave. She would have liked to have gotten the last word in, but she didn't want any of the others to see what was surely an odd expression on her face, considering how hot her cheeks suddenly felt at the mental image of Maxim sweating and naked. Better to duck out now while she still had a chance of appearing in control. Even she could plan a retreat when she felt compromised. Maxim appeared to favor this new line of attack because he was all over her that evening at Paint and Pint. She and Maxim arrived separately, with the Hammersmiths arriving together shortly afterward. Rebecca had her long red-brown hair piled up more loosely than the secretarial style she had worn that afternoon, and immediately offered Savannah a hair tie to borrow. "Cute sundress," Rebecca complimented as the two women plucked aprons from the pile on the back counter. "I've never done this before. I was hoping I hadn't overdressed." Savannah smiled. She could dress femininely when the need for it arose, and she could certainly bond with Rebecca in all the same ways she had first bonded with her roommate in college. There was really no telling what Madison O'Connor, former roommate turned best friend, would think about all this, so she had refrained from mentioning during their daily phone call that she had a date tonight. She hated keeping details of her life in the FBI from Maddie, but they both understood the necessity for it. Explaining to her at a later date that she had been forced to fabricate an entire relationship with Maxim Karev, the soon-to-be uncle of Maddie's unborn child, might prove a little harder for her friend to swallow. But she couldn't risk Vlad finding out that Maxim's impending return to the Mafia fold was all a setup. Maddie had told Savannah about Vlad's own investigation into his father's murder, but she couldn't discount him from the suspect list. Not yet. And if that meant keeping Madison out of the loop, then Savannah was prepared to deal with the consequences when they came. The two couples settled at the far back of the room. Everyone was in unanimous agreement that they were interested in doing more drinking than painting. Savannah was careful to post herself up in the center beside Rebecca, with the two men flanking them on either side. While Maxim had no compliment of his own to dispense on how she looked, he made his own appreciation abundantly clear by engaging in warfare from the outset. The moment his coworkers arrived, he kept a hand almost constantly connected to her shoulder, her arm, all, she was certain, to throw her off the game in front of the Hammersmiths. "You're reading too much into this, Savannah," she chastised herself, even as she continued to keep up cheerful conversation with Rebecca. "This is good for the mission. Hell, it's great for the mission. The more intimately he touches you in full view of outside eyes, the better." She gave a little jump then when Maxim came up behind her and grasped her elbow from behind. "You push too hard," he murmured, loud enough for the other couple to hear as he manipulated the arm that held her paintbrush. "You have to learn to be more gentle, sweetheart, at least in some areas." "I'm sorry, sweetheart. Please remind me, what qualifies you to tell me how to hold a paintbrush?" she whispered through teeth clenched in a happy smile. Rebecca had turned back to Travis to converse, so there was no real risk of them being overheard for the moment. "Well, I'm a man who's good with his hands to start," Maxim said infuriatingly. He was so obviously trying to bait her with that one that Savannah refused to respond. "And I'm also a mechanic." "You have a lot of experience holding pencil-thin shafts in your hand, huh?" Savannah remarked. "Maybe alone, in your bedroom at home?" "I'm not enjoying this," she reminded herself, even as she tallied another mark on her side of the mental scoreboard. "And if my skin feels hot where he's touching me, it's an allergic reaction to his bullshit. Or the lead in the paint, but probably his bullshit. Also, can you not patronize me in front of your friends?" she asked as he pressed his chest closer in against her back. "I don't want them to think I'm just some insipid hookup you met online. I want them to respect and like me, and my odds of getting there aren't good if you don't pave the way." "Travis and Becky don't need me to make up their minds for them about someone. And they do like you, it's obvious," Maxim muttered, surprising her. "That's the problem." "I'm sorry? The problem? Why is that a—" "Pint and pitchers!" Travis broke in as he rejoined them. Savannah had been so preoccupied with Maxim that she hadn't even noticed the other man leave. That was Task Force 101, keeping an eye on every actor and variable. So much for checking her premises. "Woohoo!" Rebecca cheered. Savannah summoned her concentration, and from the cage of Maxim's arms managed to offer a grin as well. "How the hell did you manage that?" Maxim asked approvingly as Travis topped them all off from their personal pitcher. "I may have told the owner I can get a hold of an old Ural for him," Travis confided, aiming a wink Savannah's way as he handed her a refreshed pint. These people were likable. Worst of all, Maxim was likable. although she would never admit to the fact out loud. That was a dangerous character trait conspicuously missing from his file. He certainly knew how to turn the charm on when it served him. The only question was, how did a flirtation serve him now? Was it a means to her end, the one they were meant to be collaborating on? Or did he have some more primitive purpose for letting his hands fall to her continuously that evening? "Oh, Maxim, you've barely worked on your own," Rebecca laughed, leapfrogging past Savannah's easel to look at Maxim's half-assed bowl of fruit. "Do you need someone to tell you what the colors on the palette are? I can definitely tell you the banana isn't supposed to be black like this." Rebecca pointed, looking positively tickled, and Savannah craned to look. "Why would he need someone to tell him what colors to use?" Savannah asked suspiciously. "Does he need someone to put the bumpers up for him during bowling as well?" "Max is colorblind," Rebecca explained. "That's why he always wears black and white. Didn't he tell you?" Savannah's eyebrows pulled together. "No, it didn't come up. In his dating profile, I mean." She cursed herself for the slow recovery. She felt Maxim's arms tighten around her shoulders and realized the Russian was embracing her in earnest from behind, almost leaning his weight against her. There was no way she was getting any painting done, much less drinking with her arms pinned against her sides like this. She hated the feeling of helplessness, the inability to detach herself from the warm, solid presence holding her. It went against her every instinct to let herself be secured and protected. Her head spun at the invasion. Maybe it was a good thing she couldn't drink. Maybe she shouldn't have helped herself to that last pint. If it wasn't obvious from the outset, I couldn't care less what my painting looks like. "I'm taking artistic license, thanks," Maxim replied, looking surprisingly nonplussed by all the shit he was getting. He rested his chin atop her head, and Savannah wanted to headbutt him hard enough to open up a whole new spectrum of color for the infuriating man. "Just don't start taking artistic license with my bikes," Travis suggested as he stepped back to address his own bowl of fruit. Savannah thought the other man was taking it the most seriously of all of them. "You do a shit enough job as it is." "Yeah, right. Then why don't you go hire somebody else?" Maxim asked him. "Would, if I wasn't so scared of you and your family," Travis muttered cryptically. "And anyway, Rebecca would leave me if I just cut you loose like that. I swear, sometimes I think you guys are still dating behind my back." Travis left to go coerce a closer look at one of the pieces of fruit from the instructor. This was a lot of information to process. Savannah found herself drawn out of her strange contemplation of Maxim's secrets by two major revelations. One of them being that Travis, and likely Rebecca, knew about Maxim's past and familial ties to the Russian Mafia. The second being that Maxim and Rebecca had actually dated. Her gaze moved to study the woman by Maxim's easel with renewed curiosity, but she could read nothing new in the receptionist's body language. Was it possible Rebecca was jealous of Maxim's blossoming fake relationship with her? She didn't detect any trace of ill-feeling in the other woman, and Savannah prided herself in being an accomplished reader of others. She seized her opportunity to find out more by following Maxim to the bathroom when the Russian excused himself. He drew the curtain to the back aside, and they reconvened in the hallway, stepping back into the comfortably maintained distance of two relative strangers. Savannah crossed her arms and glared at him underneath the low back hallway lighting. "You have paint on your cheek," Maxim mentioned. "Want me to get that for you?" "You were in a relationship with her?" Savannah said incredulously. "That's how she knew you were colorblind? How long did it last between the two of you? Days? Months? Years?" she arrived at when Maxim's expression gave nothing about the relative timeline away. "Didn't you think this was something I needed to know going into this?" "I thought you had a file on me," he said. "I assumed there was a page on Rebecca in there. Although what we had might have required more than one page, to be honest." He was gazing at her with a curious expression, one that Savannah couldn't begin to identify. Hadn't she just been dissecting Rebecca under a mental microscope, certain she could read the other woman like an open book? Then why was it proving so difficult to do the same to this damn Karev? Whatever his look meant, she found herself suddenly wondering if it was in response to something he saw on her own face. "I thought you didn't do girlfriends," she stated. That's what you told me in your interrogation. Maxim's mask finally broke as he raised a dark eyebrow. What else are they for? If you're immature enough to think that's funny, then forgive me for having a hard time trying to wrap my head around all this, Savannah replied. Seriously, the fact that you managed to have a working relationship with this girl, not to mention you're best friends with her husband, is just incredible to me. Why? Rebecca and I both knew it was over when it was over, Maxim shrugged. She couldn't handle what I did for a living, and I couldn't handle the possibility of one day dragging her into it. We broke it off mutually. It's what adults do. I'm perfectly aware of what adults do, Savannah fired back. A moment later, she raised a hand to brush a few stray strands of hair out of her eyes. She ignored Maxim's beastly, crooked smile as she tried to get her mental cylinders in order. Why was she even bothering to confront him about it now? It's not like she was jealous of Rebecca. She just needed to be aware of these things. That was all. Account for all actors and variables. When she pulled her hand back from smoothing her hair into place, Savannah discovered that her fingertips were coated in a wet, sticky substance. Now you're just smearing the paint. You should let me help you, Maxim offered. No, save it for when we're back out there. It'll be cute or whatever. The Russian snorted. What's incredible is that they actually buy already that we're going steady without ever having heard me mention you before. Maxim turned to look off into the main room. Savannah turned her own eyes away from the sight of his exposed throat, wishing it didn't conjure up images of all the things she could do to it in private. She didn't know if she wanted to kiss or strangle the strikingly handsome man standing before her, but she definitely wanted to be the one to make him squirm as payback for his domineering attitude all throughout their date. Guess it's true that people see what they want to see, Maxim muttered. They wanted to see me in a relationship bad enough that they were willing to accept any horseshit story that's fed to them. Your file got one thing right about me, Agent Casillero, even if it's missing pertinent information on everything else. I'm not a man to stick by one woman for long. Yeah, well, now I'm thinking I've got to quit relying on all that paperwork, Savannah replied. It pays to go with your instincts. Any good agent can tell you that much. I still had no fucking idea you were colorblind. Not a lot of people know, and I prefer to keep it that way. You didn't prefer to keep it that way with Rebecca? You know, Agent Casillero, if I didn't know any better, I'd think you're a little bit jealous of Becky, Maxim commented. Savannah decided she wouldn't deign to respond to this. Instead, she reached for the pint he was still carrying and confiscated it, downing it in one aggressive swill. So now you know about my romantic history with Mrs. Hammersmith, he continued. I can promise you it won't compromise our cover. But now, I'd like to know a little bit more about yours. Maxim shifted to lean his tall body back against the wall opposite of her. Savannah mirrored him, the empty pint glass dangling limply in her hand. I assume you haven't lacked lovers in your life. Hell, maybe you're not even single now. Of course I'm single, Savannah replied. She immediately wished she hadn't taken the fact on as a contentious point of pride, but she held fast to it. You think any man in their right mind would be comfortable letting me run around with a former Russian thug? I would guess not, Maxim agreed, dark eyes drinking her in for what must have been the 100th time that evening. The only difference now was he wasn't doing it for show with an audience present. Not a woman like you, anyway. If you were mine, I don't think I'd ever let you out of my sight. Yeah, well, she was struggling to come up with something clever to say to that. As much as we both may hate it, I'm going to need you to start thinking of me like I'm yours. I haven't completely dismissed the idea, Maxim said. Just like I haven't dismissed the memory of asking you who the last man who had you was. He didn't have me, Savannah argued. We graduated from the academy together. Both made it into the bureau, and one thing led to another. She raised the empty glass, staring at the streaks of leftover beer foam with dismay. How many had she had? 3? 4? She could definitely go for one more. It was good while it lasted, but it ended pretty quickly when I beat him out for a position on the Blood Diamond Task Force. Haven't seen much of him since." "He couldn't handle you," Maxim surmised. His diagnosis of her past relationship surprised Savannah. She had half expected some snide remark on her own faults, not the faults of the man she had left behind. He couldn't handle seeing a good thing come your way at the expense of his own happiness. Maybe she had been wrong. Maybe all those pints weren't working in her favor, because Savannah found she couldn't think of a proper response to Maxim's words. "Well, I wouldn't know about that," she settled on finally. She cracked a grin and detached from the wall to thrust her finger in against his chest like she had earlier in the day, just to see if he would let her. "At least he never tried to throw me off a mission. I think in that regard, you've got him beat." "Who says I was trying to throw you off?" Maxim asked. "Oh, come on." Savannah tucked the empty pint into her apron's front pocket and fastened her hands on her hips. "You were coming on strong all evening. I assume once we get back out there, it'll be more of the same. So what is it? Are you a method actor, Maxim Karev? Because that certainly wasn't in your file." "I may tell lies about myself to suit this stupid cover story, but that doesn't mean I'm going to hold myself back when I'm around a beautiful woman," the Russian growled. "You want to be my so-called girlfriend, you better get used to all the things I say and do to you, and that involves touching you as much as I want. You sure you're ready for it, Casillero?" He took a step nearer until Savannah could feel the press of the glass in her front pocket digging into her thigh. "Because if you think a little G-rated grab-ass was enough to throw you, then I'm not sure you're prepared for what I—" Savannah grabbed a fistful of his shirt collar and dragged Maxim down to her level, crushing her lips against his in a passionate kiss. Maybe this wasn't the headbutt she had been envisioning all along, but it was certainly enough to set sparks off of any color behind the eyes of the infuriating Russian. And her own, if she was being honest. Savannah slanted her eyes open slightly, if only to avoid the fireworks, and realized Maxim had closed his own upon colliding with her. He wasn't wearing the startled expression she had been expecting, not at all, but she had surprised him enough that he was allowing her to take full charge of the proceedings now. Her fingers constricted in the fabric of his shirt, forcing him down harder, renewing the sweet, aggressive pressure, and he slanted his lips against her own. She felt his hands sweep from his pockets and close in around her, cupping the curve of her neck and cementing against the small of her back. She tilted her chin, and he moved his, giving ground as she slid her full lower lip within reach of his teeth. Maxim rumbled a low growl in his chest, and the animalistic sound inflamed something in her. Savannah wrapped her arms around his neck, confident she was still in full control of the proceedings, as she allowed her eyes to fall shut once more. And maybe, just maybe, she allowed herself to be lost in the sensation of kissing Maxim, relishing the way he refused to give way completely beneath her, the way he stood grounded and strong enough to hold them both upright if he needed to. Crashing back into the wall wasn't even an option with the statuesque Karev standing in the way. Savannah had never kissed a man with such a thick growth of stubble. It grazed against her skin, rough and masculine, and occasionally needle-sharp enough to make her seek out a new angle and keep the kiss interesting. It reminded her of every interaction she'd had with the man, of the way he kept her on her toes, always trying to dance just one step ahead. Was it the pint glass digging into her thigh again, or was it something more this time? The thought amused her as much as it thrilled her, but the kiss had gone on more than long enough. Reassured that her point was now thoroughly made, Savannah pulled her lips free of his with a wet, satisfied gasp and extracted herself from his unresisting arms. "You're a better kisser than you look, Karev," she said, trying not to sound as starved for breath as she felt. A move to take charge like that would be completely lost on the bull-headed Russian if she allowed him to sense any sort of weakness in the aftermath of their kiss. Better hope he didn't glance down and notice the state of her knees. There seemed to be little chance of that. His dark eyes were fixed on her face, her lips, as if he was utterly stunned by the idea that they had just been joined against his own. He was struck speechless. a state that Savannah had never seen him in. She doubted she ever would again, considering she wasn't planning on a repeat performance anytime soon. She reached up to grip his shoulder, as if congratulating him on a job well done, before moving off with a smile. "Long time in the bathroom," Travis noticed when they returned to their respective easels. Rebecca held eye contact with the couple as she pointed to her own forehead demonstratively. Savannah looked to Maxim and realized to her dismay that she had tracked paint across the man's forehead when she had kissed him. She quickly scrubbed the evidence of her indiscretion away as Maxim turned to see his own mark. Rebecca, eyes shining in amusement, hid herself behind her hand and turned away as well. "I'll drive you home," Maxim said an hour later once the class had concluded and the four of them were out on the curb together. Travis and Rebecca stood slightly apart, comparing their finished paintings and teasing one another about perceived imperfections. Savannah hadn't finished hers, and neither had Maxim. When Rebecca suggested they trade anyway, they had done so without protest. "You would like that, wouldn't you?" Savannah said. She still felt warm and tingly from the alcohol. Only the alcohol, she determined. She was perfectly clear-headed otherwise. Yes. Maxim stood very close to her. They had been closer throughout the evening for the sake of appearing like a real couple, and, of course, there was the incident in the back hallway to consider. But their conversation now somehow felt more intimate than Savannah was prepared to deal with. Good thing she had other ways of dealing. A yellow cab glided up to the curb. Savannah moved to it, waving goodbye to the Hammersmiths, who called after her with invitations to come by and visit the shop later next week. "You watch your step, Karev," Savannah advised as she pulled open the back door to the vehicle. Maxim stood with his hands loosely in his pockets, her terrible still life tucked under his formidable bicep. "Why would I, when I have you to watch it for me?" he joked. Savannah rolled her eyes as she shut the door. She let him have the last word, again. But something about their parting conversation troubled her, and it had nothing to do with who had managed to come out on top that night. It was Maxim's quiet invitation to continue the night alone together, and the way he had taken her subsequent rejection in stride. A man like Maxim Karev didn't stop when met with an obstacle to what he wanted, and if what he wanted was impossibly Savannah herself, then their business arrangement had just gotten a hell of a lot more complicated. 3. Maxim. "So, you gonna need some days off?" Maxim wiped the oil off his hands and maneuvered himself out from beneath the Harley he'd been laboring on the past few days. "What's that?" "You heard me." From across the garage, Travis Hammersmith raised his wrench to brandish it in Maxim's direction. His boss had apparently decided it was too hot for shirts today. Sweat and oil mingled, streaming off his rumpled black hair and down the length of his bare chest. Maxim decided a wardrobe change wasn't a bad idea and peeled his own shirt off, balling it and tossing it into a corner of the workroom. "Yeah, I heard you." It was the day after Paint and Pints, and his head was pounding. He wasn't a beer drinker usually, as his brother Vlad's vodka cabinet could well attest to, and he disliked the muzzy feeling he had woken up with that morning. Nothing compared to the blue balls Agent Casillero left me with. After a kiss like that, the woman's rejection of him was something Maxim had never been. Pure criminal. "I'm serious, Karev." Travis crossed to the bench to dial the radio down and grab his water. "You want time off to get to know Savannah better? All you have to do is ask." It occurred to Maxim that he might have to take Travis up on the offer once his mission with Savannah began in earnest. But until then, he was sticking by his family at Slick Cycles. "It's just a fling." "Doesn't seem like just a fling." Travis drained the bottle and set it aside, before sliding open a box of toothpicks and helping himself to one. Travis smoked cigarettes usually, but never while he was in the shop. "You already seen the end of the road with this chick?" "I give it 3 months tops," Maxim stated matter-of-factly. Then, because he was feeling generous despite the hangover, "She'll break it off with me. Just you watch." "I wouldn't be so sure about that, pal. Not this time." "Yeah? What makes you say that?" he asked. careful to let his disinterest in the matter show as he bent down to hunt through his toolbox. "Just a feeling I have," Travis said. "Also, Savannah's a total smoke show. Even if you don't like her for her killer personality, do every man in your vicinity a favor and stick it out for a while longer." "You circling for my sloppy seconds again?" Maxim asked in bemusement. "I know you," Travis stated. "I know exactly how you're gonna fuck this thing up for yourself. Don't put work obligations before a potential relationship with this woman, or else you're gonna miss out on a good thing." Travis knew him, but he didn't know everything about him. Loyalty and obligation were the two major qualities instilled in Maxim since birth, but they extended to every aspect of his life. A serious relationship with a woman was just as much an obligation to him as family or work, and it wasn't something he needed right now, not when his father's killer was still out there and he was a prime suspect in the murder. "Hell, this could be a great thing," Travis continued. "Becky already loves her. She can't stop talking about her. Savannah this and Savannah that. Do you think she would eat a batch of cookies I baked for her with a body like that? Do you think we call her Anna for short?" "Yeah, she's circling for my sloppy seconds too." "You wish," Rebecca interrupted as she clicked her way into the room. "As far as I'm concerned, she's already saddled with mine. Maxim, your guy at the tattoo parlor is on line 1. "Getting new ink?" Travis asked curiously as Maxim rose. "Not me," he said. He left them alone together to imagine what that might mean as he strode from the room to take the call. "Okay, so I did the independent research, and I'm convinced that this really is a thing," Savannah said when Maxim met her that evening outside the tattoo parlor. The sky above them was pitch black, the night's mantle deepened by the blazing neon sign roosted above their heads. "Needles to say," the sign read. That had gotten a laugh out of Savannah, but something about the woman's cocked hip and crossed arms made Maxim wonder how much laughter he could look forward to hearing that night. Was the fearless agent nervous about what they were about to do? "I mean, you wouldn't steer me wrong here, would you, Karev?" she asked him. "All girlfriends of the mob have a tattoo that marks their affiliation with the Brotherhood," he asserted. "You want to be taken seriously when we're undercover? Then this is where we start." "So, let's start already," Savannah said, surprising him by mounting the steps first and pushing the door open. Maxim crooked an eyebrow and followed behind the fiery agent at a much more leisurely pace. "Ah, Maxim," a heavily inked man with a thick Russian accent to match, came out from behind the counter and clapped Maxim on the back boisterously. He turned at once to behold Savannah, extending his arms to frame his human canvas. "Adrian, this is Savannah," Maxim introduced the two of them. Savannah held her hand out straight to shake, but Adrian shook his head at the gesture before yanking her in to endure a hug that rivaled the one he had given Maxim. Nah, you greet me this way, ja? You might not feel so warmly toward me later this evening, you know." "Oh, I'm not worried about it." Savannah seamlessly brushed off the tattooist's concerns. "It's my pleasure, and also my potential pain to meet you, Adrian." Maxim couldn't help but feel slightly impressed by the woman's bravery. Working on the Blood Diamond Task Force was one thing, but there were plenty of men his size and larger who fainted at even the prospect of having their skin pricked by Adrian. Maxim let his hand drop to the small of Savannah's back as Adrian led the way to the back room. He noted that Savannah didn't shy from his reassuring touch, but that might have just been for sake of appearances. A place like Paint and Pint was removed from the Russian underworld, but he hadn't been able to guarantee her they wouldn't run afoul of a few of his old cronies here. Savannah had assured him this was a good thing, and that it meant they were ready to take their cover to its logical next phase. Books. Adrian gestured to a pile of binders stacked on a table in the corner. "Pick one up and start looking, please. I only have a few preparations to make, and then we can get started." "You choose," Savannah said abruptly as they sat down together. Maxim raised an eyebrow as he pulled the first binder off the pile. "You sure? Unlike this fake relationship of ours, whatever you decide on tonight is permanent." "I know what a tattoo is," Savannah muttered, "and I'm aware that I'm going to have to live with it the rest of my life. It's a sacrifice I'm willing to make. Anyway, the research I did stated that the male member of the Mafia that the woman is attached to is the one who ultimately decides what she gets. I'm not saying I agree with it, but if we're gonna buy into this misogynistic tradition, we might as well do it wholesale in view of everyone else. Maxim pondered on this as he flipped through the book. It was a smart move on Savannah's part. While the parlor wasn't filled at this relatively late hour in the evening, there were still a few rough-looking men loitering about, reclining on sofas or tables and joking with each other in Russian. Maxim recognized several of them, and he was certain his own observations were mutual. However, no one approached the couple. He noted that just as many eyes drifted to him as they did to the stunning woman he was keeping company with. "Do you know the meaning of the name Maxim?" he asked her after a long moment's consideration. Savannah shook her head. "It means great, and I want you to wear something that symbolizes that." He flipped the book around, presenting her with the open page, and pointed to a relatively simple design that had caught his attention. "I want you to get a sword." Savannah didn't take advantage of what was probably an easy joke at his expense. Instead, she craned herself forward to study the design, nipping at the knuckle of one finger as she thought. "Where?" she asked finally. Maxim set the binder aside, letting it fall open at his feet before rising. Savannah rose also. He glanced across the room, noting that Adrian appeared in the final stages of sterilizing the needle he would be using. "Turn around," Maxim ordered. Savannah's eyes narrowed, but she complied. As soon as she was looking the other way, Maxim stepped up close behind her and shifted her amber hair to one side. She was wearing a cream-colored cable-knit sweater with a low collar that hung off her dark, slender shoulders. "Can you take this off?" Maxim murmured. After a brief pause, Savannah reached back behind her to pull the sweater over her head. Beneath it, she wore a white camisole. Maxim, and everyone else in the establishment, could clearly see the dark outline of her push-up bra. It was a revealing glimpse at an already tantalizing woman, but Maxim wanted to push her further, keeping his expression carefully neutral to anyone who might be watching, as if he had done this 1,000 times before and the novelty had long ago worn off. Maxim settled his hands on her waist. "What about something along the side?" he murmured. "What's the point then?" Savannah asked, her breath catching slightly in her throat. "I'm not going to infiltrate the Russian Mafia wearing a string bikini. We want outside eyes to see it and think we're legit, don't we? So long as it's visible, put it wherever you want." "You shouldn't say something like that to a man like me," he whispered against her neck as he lowered himself down, palms grazing the outside of one jean-clad thigh. "I might take it the wrong way. What about here?" His light touch deepened into a possessive grab as he took hold of her upper leg. "You want me to freeze my ass off in short shorts?" Savannah asked him. "I'd put you in them. Hell, every man here would put you in them if they were forced to." He glided his hand back up the outside of her ass and moved his fingers beneath the front of her shirt, caressing the silky soft skin of her navel. "I think given the option, there isn't a soul present who wouldn't prefer seeing you naked." Let's assume that they won't. It definitely wasn't his imagination, he decided. Savannah was breathing harder beneath his touch. "Any other bright ideas for a spot?" "I could explore your spots all day," Maxim promised darkly as he rose again, taking his hand away from the body he ached to touch and resting it on the nape of her neck. This time he felt Savannah's skin erupt in goosebumps, her instinctive reaction to feeling him behind her and grasping a vital, sensitive area. Was she afraid of him? Somehow he didn't think so. And the implications of what her body might feel when he was around were tantalizing. "What about here?" he broke their standoff by asking. He began to stroke a finger down the curve of her neck, but Savannah quickly reached back to still his hand. There's good," she agreed. "Let's get this over with." As they moved together across the room to rejoin Adrian, Maxim decided a small part of him liked the idea of leaving his mark on Agent Casiero. He was going easy on her by selecting a place on her body she could easily conceal by wearing her hair down. He explained the design and positioning to Adrian, who praised the decision as Savannah sat down and pulled her hair into a messy bun on top of her head. "Have you had any work done previously?" Adrian asked her. Maxim was all ears for this one. Savannah cast a hesitant look his way, and he leaned in, smiling like he was as invested as the artist in her answer. "I have a butterfly across my lower back," she confessed. Maxim thought he had never heard the word butterfly spoken with such derision before. "Ah, a babushka. Lovely choice," Adrian complimented her. "You have a tramp stamp?" Maxim stated smugly, easing back on the stool he occupied and crossing his arms. "When'd you get that done? College?" "For your information, it was over a spring break in Daytona," Savannah said through gritted teeth. "And my friend Maddie thought it was a terrible idea." "Should have listened to your friend," he said. "I know that now," Savannah groused. "At least she still pretends to be supportive of my decision." "Want me to hold your hand for you now?" Maxim joked. He watched her face flex in automatic response, but it wasn't the confident smile he was used to seeing. It was close-lipped, never quite reaching the full and generous dimensions he knew it was capable of. Could it be the blackmailing, avenging angel in a pantsuit actually feared the prick of a needle? As Adrian drew closer, Maxim watched Savannah lean away and wince. "Hold yourself very still now, please," Adrian advised. "I promise I will not make you look any less beautiful. It's not possible." Savannah gave a weak laugh, then glanced down in surprise when Maxim's larger hand enveloped hers. He didn't remember telling it to do that. As soon as the low buzzing of Adrian's needle started, her grip on his fingers tightened. "I should tell you what you're getting yourself into," he said in a low voice. "You didn't think that maybe this should have come up sooner?" She gave a little laugh, trying to put on a brave face. They knew that Adrian was well within earshot of whatever advice Maxim felt like imparting to her, and that nothing, even hinting at their real arrangement, could be divulged. "You want the proper initiation? You're gonna have to let me pour vodka over you when it's done," Maxim continued. He saw Adrian's mouth flex, but the tattoo artist was a professional. He kept his body perfectly poised behind Savannah as he began to trace the outline he had stenciled in ink. "Typical sterilization procedure. Right, Adrian?" "I'm not some ship you get to christen before you sail," Savannah snapped, her tone more a product of pain than any real offense. "They didn't finish you off that way down at Daytona Beach," Maxim mocked. "Pity. You could have killed 2 spring breaks with 1 stone by beginning the wet t-shirt contest immediately after." "Fuck you," Savannah said with a chuckle. "All right, why don't you regale me with stories of your own spring break?" "Never had one," Maxim admitted, shifting thoughtfully in his chair, her hand still occupying and occasionally squeezing his. "Wanna go this year?" "You want me to pop your cherry?" Savannah's smile twisted wistfully, and she kept her eyes on him, studying him, even as her body flinched slightly beneath the onslaught of the needle. It was one of the most beautifully tragic expressions that Maxim had ever seen. "You pay for my ink tonight, and it's a date. Done." It was the script. It was all part of the script, and they were merely actors. Even if every line they traded was made up on the fly, this wasn't real flirtation. And it was a credit to Agent Casiero's skills that he had fooled himself into almost thinking it was. "And done," Adrian proclaimed what felt like only moments later, drawing back from his delicate canvas. Maxim leaned around to look as the tattoo artist went and retrieved a mirror so that Savannah could assess the finished product. The sword was small and slender as a dagger, and entirely monochrome, which was why Adrian had been able to finish it so swiftly. Savannah turned her head slightly, wincing at what Maxim knew, having been on the receiving end of Adrian's work many times himself, was the ache that accompanied the finished product. "Looks good on you," he noted approvingly. "Not half bad," Savannah admitted, turning her head more gingerly to look again from a different angle. "Now, everyone will know I'm yours, right?" Maxim hated the way the question caught him by surprise. Obviously, Savannah hadn't intended it the way he instinctively took it, but he couldn't help but consider her in those same terms when he looked at her now, as his. The thought of exercising some modicum of possession over such a beautiful, lethal creature lit a fire in his belly. There was no denying the flare of desire he felt for her, had felt for her since the beginning, was only stoked by the idea that his mark had been imprinted on her for the rest of her life. Adrian dabbed the area clean and taped a bandage across it, effectively sheathing the sword. Savannah slid down off the chair and went to use the washroom as Maxim followed Adrian to the counter. When he reached into his back pocket to go for his wallet, Adrian stalled him with a hand. "Might give to her," the artist said. "She's a lovely woman." "I'm a lucky man." The words passed his lips easily, reflexively, as he watched Savannah exit the bathroom. She had let her hair down and was still rubbing the back of her neck, but smiled and stopped when she noticed him watching her. She pointed to indicate she was going outside before disappearing out the front door. Like a moth mesmerized by a departing light, Maxim found himself compelled to follow. He dropped a nod of thanks to the proprietor before starting for the door. "Maxim." Adrian's thick pronunciation of his name gave him pause. Maxim turned to find the tattoo artist smiling, although the look in his eyes was calculated. "You are planning on returning to work soon. Your real work, ja?" "I'd appreciate it if you didn't mention you saw me," Maxim replied, knowing full well the pair of loose lips he was talking to. That was part of the point of coming here tonight. His friendship with Adrian was practically lifelong, but that didn't mean he trusted the other man to know when to keep his mouth shut. He did feel a little sorry for manipulating him like this, but decided privately that he would blame his new capacity for subterfuge on Savannah. Odds were the agent would approve. "Ah," Adrian said knowingly. "Understood." He winked, and Maxim offered him the slyest of smiles in return as he clapped the other man on the back. "You did great work tonight. Be seeing you." Outside, he found Savannah gazing at her reflection in the side mirror of his Nighthawk, occasionally attempting to turn and scrutinize the bandage on the back of her neck. "Leave it alone," he advised her. "We both know you didn't really want a new tattoo, and you definitely don't want one that's aggravated." Savannah tilted her head to look at him before straightening up once more. Maxim didn't attempt to suppress the urge that came over him then. He embraced it wholeheartedly, reaching forward to shift her hair back into place over her neck. His fingertips brushed fleetingly across her skin. Did he imagine it, or did she lean slightly into his touch? Did her eyelashes flutter? Maybe her eyes were still adjusting to the darkness outside the parlor. "It's not so bad," Savannah murmured finally. "It'll be a reminder, at least, of how seriously I take my work." Somehow, Maxim didn't think the appended remark was what she had intended to say. "Yeah? What's so forgettable about this job that you need reminding?" he asked, trying to keep his voice light, but his face as he watched her felt too tense. "Maybe next time I won't allow myself to get in this deep," Savannah replied. His knuckles were still poised at her neck. It would be so easy to lean in, to capture those lips under the cover of darkness and prove to the woman she was still treading in the shallows. She thought she was in deep now. He could carry her down further and show her just how pleasurable a fall could be. A pair of headlights cut a blinding swath in the darkness. Maxim blinked and turned, and Savannah lifted a hand to shield her eyes from the onslaught. "Looks like my cab's here," she mentioned as she started down the drive. He wanted to put a hand out to stop her, to reel her back. He wanted to tell her to forget writing with anyone else. He wanted to pick up his thought process where he had last left off and make it a reality. Instead, he stated the obvious. "You could ride with me. You know, it would look better if we left together." His invitation gave Savannah pause, and she turned back to him with an arched eyebrow. "Really?" She didn't sound as if she quite believed him. She fastened a hand on one cocked hip as she considered him. "You're always offering me rides now, Karev, where before you couldn't spare so much as a single ounce of gas on me. What gives?" "Maybe you're not the only one getting in too deep," Maxim replied as he slipped his hands into his pocket. "You'd like that, wouldn't you?" she challenged, a small smile tugging at the edge of her lips. "I know a way you could easily find out," Savannah chuckled. "Good night, lover. Get some rest. We'll reconvene later this week." She flipped him a wave, and Maxim watched her stride off into the night. Reconvene had to be the least sexy word he had ever heard in his life, and he was positive she had intended it that way. Still, the platonic terms she insisted on using to shape their relationship had less of an effect on him than she might have hoped. As Maxim mounted his bike, he entertained the idea of mounting something else, that is, someone else, in his imagination. He had a mind to mix his business with pleasure, and he was starting to think Savannah might not be as impervious to his charms as she hoped. A little tumble between the sheets might help clear up a few things between them, and help them move forward without all this unresolved sexual tension getting in the way. After all, Maxim mused as the night wind rushed by him, the woman was only responsible for investigating the murder of his father. What could possibly go wrong? 4. Savannah. "How are you healing up?" Rebecca asked her. It had already been a week since she got her new ink, and Savannah figured it was now or never. She reached behind her head and began to slowly peel the bandage away from her tattoo. Rebecca leaned across the reception desk to get a better look. "Oh," Rebecca breathed reverently as Savannah stripped the last of the tape from her tender skin. "That's really beautiful. I like it. Clean, simple. Adrian does great work, doesn't he?" "You tell me," Savannah said with some amusement. "I'm not going to be able to see this thing for myself. I'll have to trust in the opinions of others." "I'll do you one better," Rebecca offered. She slipped her phone out of her pocket and snapped a photo as Savannah modeled the back of her neck. The two women then crowded around the screen to get a good look. Savannah had to admit that the black and white sword looked pretty badass. Few people would know about its existence at first glance, and she was certain even fewer would find occasion to remark on it. It suited her, certainly better than the butterfly tramp stamp she had kept a secret for the last several years. She wondered how that particular trip to Daytona Beach might have turned out differently had Maxim been there with her in the parlor to advise her then. "What does Max think about it?" Rebecca asked. Savannah shook her head, trying to dispel thoughts of spring breaks long past. "He chose it for me, actually." "So you got this to— Oh." Rebecca's cheerful face folded suddenly in somber contemplation. Savannah blinked at the sudden change. She had yet to see the happy-go-lucky secretary wear such an expression. "To what?" she prompted. She found herself suddenly realizing just how much Rebecca knew about Maxim outside of what he looked like naked and his inability to see color. Had Maxim told her about the operation? If so, it would be a huge blow to their cover. Even if Savannah suspected she could trust the Hammersmiths, having her true identity compromised and the nature of her real relationship with Maxim out in the open spelled the end of the mission before it had even begun in earnest. "I know you're falling in love with Maxim," Rebecca said finally, surprising her. "It's so obvious to me. When I look at the two of you together. Even Travis can't help but notice it, and he didn't even know I was flirting with him until I was standing topless in his bedroom." Rebecca reached across the desk to lay her hand on Savannah supportively. "I know everything is new and exciting, but just be careful, okay? If you ever want out, you can tell him. You can tell me," the other woman continued. "I know we don't know each other that well yet, but trust me when I say I'm good for this sort of thing." After a measured moment passed between them, Savannah nodded. She had no idea where this was coming from, and the lack of transparency bothered her. Rebecca looked as if she genuinely wanted to help. But with what? How much did the woman know, and how much did she think Savannah knew? There were too many layers at work here. She needed to resume what she had come here to do. She needed to locate Maxim and inform him of their next step. In addition to that, she now had another puzzle to solve, and she was certain the Russian held her missing piece. "I know you're falling in love with Maxim." Rebecca had only seen them together a few times. How could she confidently make such a statement? Then again, Savannah mused, Rebecca had likely been in love with Maxim herself at one point or another. Maybe there was some projection going on here. Still, she wished it wasn't that phrase in particular that kept cycling through her mind. It was like having some sappy song, totally not her style, stuck in her head. Maybe some fresh air would help her clear it out again. "I'll check back in with you before I leave," Savannah promised, flipping the receptionist a friendly wave. The front desk phone rang, and Rebecca grinned in agreement as she took the call. Savannah exited the shop and looped around back. Rebecca had told her she would find Maxim in the yard working, and she wasn't disappointed with the intel. She saw him sprawled out beneath a half-completed custom cycle, turning a wrench with rhythmic, competent twists of his hand. Most of the frame of the machine was missing, so she had a clear view of the man at work. The broad-shouldered, naked torso, sans shirt, and the bulging muscles that collaborated beneath a sheen of sweat to power his body. Not a single movement was wasted. Every motion was tightly controlled, working in tandem at the behest of the Russian's analytical mind. The thought of what he could do with that body filled Savannah with mixed feelings of awe and appreciation. There was no man in her department built like Maxim Karev, and she doubted if any agent could win against him in a fair fight. It wasn't that hard to imagine just how intimidating he must have been working as head of security for the Russian Mafia. It wasn't hard, either, to imagine how a man like that might operate in the bedroom. In fact, it was a scenario that was becoming increasingly easy for Savannah to visualize the more she got to know him. What was all that muscle, all that sweat and ink and motor oil really capable of? Did he work his women like he worked on his machines in the shop, probing and polishing and tightening them to peak performance? Or did he engage in sex as rough and dirty as his looks? She imagined it must be a constant battle for dominance, for supremacy, going up against him in an arena where he clearly considered himself the sure victor. What if she was the woman to finally challenge that assumption? Gazing at him sprawled provocatively on his back, it was hard to ignore the tension in her shoulders, the heat in her core. So she was attracted to Maxim, and she thought about sex with him. She was a hot-blooded woman, and it was only natural. There was an enormous difference between having fantasies about someone and manifesting them, and she wasn't about to risk her badge by embarking on a forbidden affair with a Russian thug. Maybe in another life, she thought wistfully. A life imagined for the two of us by Rebecca, anyway. "Please, don't get up," she said as she drew closer. Maxim's eyes flickered as he noticed her for the first time, his mouth twisting in a rueful smile. He kept turning the wrench. "Don't worry, I won't. I just had an interesting conversation with Rebecca." Savannah crossed her arms, leaning one hip slightly against the side of the bike. The frame was propped up between two sturdy-looking sawhorses, so she wasn't overly concerned with tipping it over and squashing her Mafia contact. "She thinks I'm falling in love with you." Maxim glanced up from his work. She wished she could better discern his expression, but his dark eyes were as unreadable and fathomless as ever to her. "Guess our cover's working out then," was all he said. "Yeah, guess so." Savannah chewed her lower lip. She had come by the garage with one purpose and one only, or so she told herself, and that was to talk shop with the shop boy, as it were. She needed to get the conversation back on track, but she couldn't help her next question, which was only tangentially related to her investigation. "She knew about you, Rebecca. She knew what you were and what you're probably about to get yourself into again. Is your connection with the mob the only reason you guys broke up?" "It's more complicated than that." Maxim had gone back to work. Savannah was no expert, but even she could see he had already tightened the same screw, probably beyond what was strictly necessary. "Rebecca may have known what I was, but that's only because we were running in the same circle. She's from a mob family too. Hell, you might say she was my inspiration for getting out myself, or at least responsible for planting the idea in my head. Even after we'd broken up, she's the one who introduced me to Travis and got me my job here." Savannah figured trying to master her surprise was useless at this point. Maxim was eyeing her again and had definitely already seen her slack-jawed disbelief. She snapped her mouth closed with a click of teeth as she tried to wrap her head around this latest string of revelations. Sweet little Rebecca is from a mob family? I had no idea. No idea? Of course you didn't. Maxim shrugged his shoulders horizontally. See, that's where you lawful types always fuck up. After a while, you start to think people amount to the paperwork sandwiched between two sides of a manila folder. You didn't think much of me when we first met. That isn't true, Savannah snapped. I thought, and I still think, a good deal of you, Max. It can't have been easy turning your life around the way you did, and then having to deal with your father's death. Yeah? Maxim cocked one of his thick, dark eyebrows at her in disbelief. Maybe she had let herself fall into a trap with that one, but she took the bait willingly enough. Their cover was good, but if they wanted to improve their rapport with one another and their public image of being a couple by proxy, then maybe it was important to get some things straight between them. Yeah, Savannah echoed. Yeah, I mean it. Even if the paperwork was right about you being a promiscuous ladies' man, Rebecca won't dish on that front, but I'm not sure she needs to. The way you talk to women speaks volumes. The way I speak to you, you mean, Maxim corrected. Did you really come by to investigate my relationship history today, Savannah? Or is it possible you came by to investigate something else? I came by to discuss the next step in the mission with you, she said, keeping her gaze trained resolutely on his face and not allowing it to stray once to the sculpted body that extended beneath it. And you're going to strip that screw if you aren't careful, buddy. Yeah? He challenged. Why don't you get down here and show me how it's done, buddy? Savannah had no idea how motorcycles worked, but she damn well wasn't going to back down now. Besides, she had a feeling this was a test of some sort. Maybe Maxim was waiting to see how dirty she was willing to get. After a beat, she snorted in answer and uncrossed her arms, peeling her t-shirt off and tossing it to the side. She then slid beneath the bike to join him, careless of the dirt and oil that seemed to immediately find its way onto her. Her bare shoulder brushed against Maxim's. Either he had been out here in the sun a while, or his core body temperature was naturally fever hot, because just touching skin on skin felt like enough to burn her. She wasn't just imagining it, was she? Try not to get titillated or anything. It's just a sports bra, she said. She squirmed her hips a little to make more room for herself beneath the bike, conscious of his eyes on her naked abdomen, and not exactly hating it. Don't flatter yourself, Maxim fired back. Why don't you show me what you can do? Fine, Savannah said. Tell me what tools you need and I'll grab them for you. Unless that single screw really is all you planned on working on today. They worked on the undercarriage of the bike together in silence, with Maxim occasionally murmuring the name of something he needed from his toolbox, and Savannah using her long arms and closer proximity to pass them over to him. I think I could see the appeal of this line of work. It's meditative, simple. I bet it makes for a nice change from smashing skulls together, or worse. She watched Maxim's hands. She was certain those hands had killed men in the past. Hell, Savannah wasn't green. She had put a bullet through a few perps, all of them terrible people. It never got easier, but she'd learned to stop hesitating after a while and trust in her instincts. Everything in her world was black and white, figuratively speaking, and not literally like the world Maxim perceived. So she didn't lose a lot of sleep most nights. She turned her head in toward Maxim, studying his profile as he worked. Tom's not going to pay for the taillight, by the way, she mentioned. He says getting to pretend date a smoke show like me is payment enough. That guy is a pain in my ass. I see him driving by here all the time. He thinks he's incognito, but I had to stop Travis from calling the cops on him. Maxim drew the back of his wrist across the crease in his forehead, banishing the beads of sweat and tracking a smear of grease near his temple. It reminded Savannah of their first date and the way she had transferred paint onto him when she had... And also, you did not just fucking call yourself a smoke show, Maxim said. I didn't. Tom did. I'm just relaying what other people tell me, she protested. Nobody calls you that to your face, Maxim stated. Especially not someone you work with professionally. You might be surprised, Savannah muttered. Yeah? Is this where I get the woman in a man's world spiel? This is where you get bent, Karev, she said. I didn't come by to hold your hand and kiss away your tears while you cry about your broken taillight. You haven't told me why you came by. Not anything specific, he reminded her. He shifted himself closer, intentionally, Savannah suspected, and she tried to move away. Unfortunately, her shoulder knocked one of the horses, striking a sweet spot that made the entire carriage tilt. Maxim swore in the same instant that Savannah's heart lodged in her throat. She could see the hulking frame tipping toward them both as if in slow motion. She raised her forearms up and braced herself for impact, squeezing her eyes tightly shut. She heard the metal thunk heavily against a human body, but she never felt the bike come crashing down. Savannah squinted one eye open before they both widened in astonishment. In the split second it had taken the bike to come crashing down to earth, Maxim had rolled over on top of her, using his wider body to shield her from harm. He strained visibly beneath the weight of the frame, bracing himself with both arms on either side of her. His own eyes were clenched closed, his teeth bared with the effort it took to keep her out of harm's way. She couldn't spare a moment to think about what he had done. Savannah reached around him and, with a grunt, managed to combine her strength with his and hurl the bike off his back. She wasn't in a position to immediately worry about whether or not she had damaged the bike. Nothing Maxim can't fix, she assumed. There were more important matters to address at the moment. Are you all right? She demanded. Her voice shook with adrenaline. A bead of sweat rolled off Maxim's left shoulder and splashed onto her skin. She tracked the rise and fall of his chest until it had slowed below the rhythm of her pulse. She was out of danger, so why did her heart race faster than before? All right. Maxim let out a ragged breath before cracking one eye open at her. Just remind me to never let you near one of my bikes again. Savannah craned herself upward, snaking one hand behind Maxim's neck, drawing him down to her before he could punctuate his thought. Her lips had already met his before she knew that she was kissing him. She didn't know how. She barely knew why, only that she craved something different than their usual back and forth. Maybe this was her way of thanking him. Maybe this was the real reason she had come all the way out here today. She felt his arm slip beneath her, finding the natural curve of her spine, forcing an arch in her back. His chest brushed against hers. She felt every lean line of him, all the way down to their joined pelvises. She felt the button on the crotch of his pants dig a half-moon into her skin as he forced his swelling need beneath her jean-clad legs. She couldn't navigate this, couldn't think. His lips were on hers and her mouth was moving, desperate to taste all of him, to incite more of the man's ready response. She had taken him by surprise before, in that moment stolen in the back hallway of Paint and Pint. She knew Maxim was an intuitive kisser, but his full prowess still eluded her. If only he'd give her a taste now. The Russian seemed all too willing to oblige her. He rolled his body once against her, hugging her so close that her breast flattened beneath them. They ached to be touched, to be freed from the bondage of the sports bra. But Maxim's other hand was occupied cradling the back of her head, pulling her to him even as he pushed back with his mouth. A single, unguarded moment, and he plunged his tongue inside her, invading her with a certainty that hadn't been there before. Too close. They were too close, and this was too much. Every domineering inch of Maxim's frame, and the way her own body gave itself over eagerly to moving in time with his, struck an alarm bell in her head. He was the beast her first impression had warned her he was. He was a wolf in monochrome clothing, and he was more than willing to take full advantage of any opening she gave him. She wouldn't be surprised if he had a mind to take her right here, right now. without a care for clocking out or the fact that only a wall separated the two of them from his ex. "That's two now," Maxim murmured against her lips. "What?" she asked breathlessly. For a wild moment, she thought the man had actually read her thoughts. He certainly felt close enough to. She couldn't comprehend what he was talking about. She couldn't even fully comprehend why they were talking when they could be doing other things with their 2 times now that you've kissed me." Maxim eased back a little, but he didn't go far. He reclined on top of her like a sphinx guarding a riddle. "If I didn't know any better, I'd say you're abusing your position of power over me, Agent Casiero." "Funny, it doesn't feel that way from where I'm lying," Savannah pointed out. Maxim's mouth flexed in an agreeable grin, and God, was he stunning when he looked at her that way. She needed to put a wall up, fast. He was already lowering himself down again to claim her for a second round. Apparently, this time he was determined to be the aggressor, the provocateur, the one who dictated the start and finish, and Savannah had a feeling she knew exactly what sort of finish he had in mind. Her hands came between them at the last instant, pushing against his chest, holding off the lips that her body privately yearned for. Maxim's grin died. Savannah watched the rapid-fire emotions manifest on his handsome face. Hurt, doubt, frustration. Before frustration could give way to anger, she shoved him off her and sat up. I broke protocol," she apologized abruptly. It felt like a weak excuse, even to her own ears, something more native to a machine than a hot-blooded woman. "I can't do this with you, I'm sorry. I'm attracted to you and that's it. That's all it can be." "Well, I'm attracted to you too," Maxim growled impatiently. Savannah hated the way her eyes drifted to the man's groin, and the way that she didn't come away disappointed. She couldn't allow herself a lot of things in that moment, and a second look at Maxim's obvious erection was chief among them. She filed away certain information for later, determined to consider it only when she was alone. Unfortunately, the bulge in Maxim's pants was something he was going to have to deal with more immediately if he intended to go back to work that afternoon. "Great. So, we're attracted to each other. It's out in the open," she said. "Now we can forget about it and focus on the mission. Maybe you can forget about a kiss like that, but I can't," Maxim stated. "There's more where that came from, and we both know it. There's no filing that information away. So I propose we get it out of both our systems before it winds up boiling over at an inopportune moment." Savannah scoffed as she hauled herself to her feet. She hunted around for her shirt and instead found his. It would do. She wrestled it on, careless of the fact that she was leaving him with a fitted woman's t-shirt that he probably couldn't even get his head through. "Well, I reject your proposal," she answered him. "I'm not going to sleep with some Russian Lotharia who I barely trust anyway." "So you trust me?" Maxim insisted. "I can work with that." "I may be forced to trust you, but that doesn't mean I trust your family." Savannah crossed her arms and held her ground firmly as Maxim rose up beside her. "To be frank, I'm almost certain it was someone in the Karev-Ivankov family who murdered your father. At some point very soon, Max, I'm going to have to arrest someone close to you, or worse." She didn't bother clarifying what the worst was. They both knew the dangerous bloodline he came from. "And I guarantee you're not going to want to work out a deal with me then. Not the kind you're thinking of anyway." She watched his expression darken like a storm front. A lesser man or woman would have likely rescinded what she said, or even apologized. But Savannah had never been one to beat around the bush. It was a good reminder for both of them just what the stakes were. "You think the killer is someone in my own family?" Maxim demanded. "My uncle, maybe? Or one of my brothers? And you didn't think to tell me sooner? You told me I was going back in to investigate my father's death, Savannah. You never told me you would use the information I brought back to you against my own family." "Don't," she said. "Don't what?" Maxim asked flatly. "Don't look that way. Don't go all introspective on me," Savannah gestured to him. You're the primary suspect in this case to everyone but me, in case you've forgotten. And that includes the family of criminals you speak so highly of. You don't think one of your beloved brothers wouldn't throw you under the bus if he thought he could get away with it? No, Maxim said. But there was a flicker of something there, a shadow of uncertainty that passed across his face before it was gone again. Savannah pounced on it. She had to make her point. You aren't your father's killer, Maxim. But justice is a two-way street. You don't get to be innocent and decide to take the fall for somebody else. If someone in your family murdered Sergei, then you let me handle it. You walk away and let them fry. And you don't even think about trying to give a false confession. Assuming that's what I'm thinking. Assuming that's what you're thinking. She couldn't banish the memory of the way he'd thrown himself between her and the bike. It had come instinctively, naturally, his desire to protect and defend. Hell, some of the Bureau's top agents didn't even have that kind of loyalty ingrained in them. If Maxim was half the man she suspected he was, then Savannah doubted she was very far off the mark in thinking he would take the fall for someone else in his family. Neither of them backed down. Instead, they stood in thunderous silence, glaring into each other's eyes. This was what she had wanted, Savannah thought forlornly, as Maxim turned away eventually to answer a buzzing from his cell phone. This was supposed to be a return to normalcy for them. She was an FBI agent, and he was her underworld contact. If their interests aligned, they could only be limited in scope, and it was better for them both that they remembered that. Then why did it feel so abnormal to be at odds with him? "Gordy," Maxim intoned as he picked up the call. "Gordy Savin," Savannah murmured to herself. Maxim raised his eyes, but didn't confirm or deny the identity of the caller. The Savins were heavily involved in mob security and had taken over most of Maxim's responsibilities when the latter had defected. Gordy Savin was the father. He was grooming his son, Lucas, to fully take over Maxim's vacated position. All of this Savannah knew from the Bureau's confidential files on the Karevs and their associates. So much for learning nothing from paperwork. Gordy carried the majority of the conversation. Maxim kept silent, his lips tightly compressed, only nodding occasionally in affirmation at something that was said. Savannah took the break in their own conversation to find her own T-shirt and trade it out for Maxim's. She held it out to him as a peace offering as he hung up the phone. "Gordy wants to meet. Says he knows more about the murder than is safe to say over the phone." Savannah's eyebrow lifted. "What? He wants to meet now?" Maxim nodded, reclaiming his shirt and pulling it over his head. "Then I'm coming with you," she said. He looked about to protest, but she held up her hand to stall him. "Tell him he interrupted a date and you had no choice but to bring me. You can park your bike and leave me if you want to. I'm just not comfortable letting you go into this totally alone." "Gordy is a family friend," Maxim stated. "But then I guess I know your opinion of my family." Savannah said nothing. She followed him out front to his bike, only half listening as he made up an excuse to Rebecca about why he had to depart work early. When he exited the shop, she saw that he was carrying an extra helmet. She assumed that meant she had won this latest round. She sure as hell didn't feel like a victor. 5. Maxim. Gordy Savin was short, stooped, and gray. If he existed as a shadow of his more vital son Lucas, then he was certainly a more competent echo. Like Maxim's uncle Igor, Gordy was an easy man to overlook, and he preferred it that way. One didn't survive as long as he did inside the mob by being flashy. Maxim pulled the collar of his riding jacket up as he crossed the park lawn to meet his contact. Twilight colored in the sky beyond the trees. He could only hope his meeting now would be as fleeting. He didn't like being called out into the open to meet like this. Judging by the look on Gordy's craggy, solemn face, the older man didn't like it any more than he did. He was likely only doing this as a favor to Sergei's memory. Gordy had always been as loyal as they come. "Maxim, it's been a few years, hasn't it?" Gordy greeted him once he was within earshot. "You've grown taller, but then you're a Karev. The men in your family never stop growing. Gordy? Maxim nodded to a pair of darkly dressed men sitting on a park bench a few yards away. I assume those two are with you? Never can be too careful these days. Lovely woman, by the way, Gordy noticed. Maxim turned to follow the older man's gaze over his shoulder toward the parking lot. Savannah was leaned up against the seat of the Nighthawk, staring off toward the freeway. She looked as perfectly and as effortlessly posed as a pin-up model on an exotic postcard. She with you? I know, it's hard to believe, Maxim said. Gordy chuckled and shook his head. You underestimate an old man's memory. I remember what you used to get up to, and who you would get up to it with. You were infamous for your ways. Gordy looked again at Savannah, and Maxim didn't begrudge the man a double take. Never one so beautiful, though, if I do say so myself. You seem to be doing well in your new life. Maybe I do a favor by keeping family matters to myself. Maxim said nothing. He waited. Hit man, Gordy said finally. That's the rumor going around. Someone hired inside the Bratva. But I've recently been led to believe this amounts to more than just an unsubstantiated rumor, Maxim. I spoke to Lucas about it. Maxim kept his expression carefully neutral. He and Lucas Soffin had been in competition with one another since they were boys. In the end, Maxim had been the superior and hired as the organization's head of security out of high school. To this day, Lucas still claimed it was nepotism that had earned him the position. They had come to blows about it often, until Maxim had defected from the organization and ceased to care about the vacancy he left behind him. Something told him the surprise career move had probably only made Lucas like him less. He says Vlad came into possession of a note, a threat, before the art museum was all shot to hell. Lucas says Vlad uncovered proof that there was a hit out on him, and that it was coded in a way that only one of the Russian Brotherhood would understand. Where can I find this proof? Maxim asked. Gordy shrugged. You'll want to ask your brother about that. Maybe he still has the order on paper, and maybe he doesn't, but I'm certain he has drawn his own conclusions on the matter. He doesn't want to see me, Maxim replied. We haven't been on good terms since I left. Also, I might have broken into his apartment and drunk him dry. Whatever Vlad's opinion of him was at the moment, he couldn't risk getting his brother more involved. Vlad was an expecting father and only just beginning to work his way out of the Mafia himself. He had been the last holdout among the three brothers, and Maxim didn't want his own relapse negatively affecting his brother's choices. Still, why hadn't Vlad told him about this? Maxim had known about the shootout, but had steered clear of the incident outside of confirming for himself that his brother was unharmed. Not only was he number one on his brother's shit list, but he knew he probably also ranked pretty highly on his brother's list of suspects in their father's death. He had fought with Sergei before he was murdered. Considering the way the Karev family historically conducted their fights, it only made sense that the lion's share of suspicion might now fall to him. You left, Gordy interrupted his brooding by shrugging again. But you are coming back now. Ja? Is that the rumor? Maxim asked. It would benefit their cover if it was. Still, a part of him couldn't help hating that it seemed almost expected he should return. His mob ties ran deep, and there were clearly those on both sides of the law who suspected he would never escape his heritage. He didn't turn, but an image of Savannah's face flashed in his mind. What did she think of him? Did she really trust him as much as she claimed? Or did she also suspect his affair with the world outside the Russian Mafia was only temporary? A low, buzzing noise drew Maxim's attention back to the present, banishing his thoughts about the woman. Excuse me, Gordy said as he flipped open his cell and turned away. Something clicked in Maxim's head, and his eyes narrowed. Who knows you're here? Did someone put you up to this? He took in the vision of the stooped, gray professional, as if seeing him for the first time. The context of their initial reunion was gone. replaced instead by the memory that the Softens had never been his biggest fans on the inside. And that was when he started to notice more minute details. "Why do you have a burner phone, Soften?" Gone was the chilly cordiality of the moment before. Gordy glared at him and waved him off. The older man clearly didn't like being interrupted, but then neither did Maxim, and he was nowhere near finished questioning his father's lackey. He grabbed hold of the man's shoulder and forced him around again. "I'm giving you until the count of 1 to answer my questions, old man," he growled. The situation escalated quicker than he had imagined it would. 1 minute he had his hands on Gordy, and the next minute the 2 security goons in black were wrapped around his arms, hauling him back. Maxim wrestled against them and swore, clenching his hands into fists he was more than happy to use. He heard the quicksilver hiss of a switchblade being engaged, and his blood started pumping. He wasn't the son of a Mafia head anymore, not a living one anyway. Any incentive to avoid carving him up had likely died with Sergei. "Get the fuck off him," a female voice ordered. The cold click of a safety going off had 4 heads turning simultaneously in the direction of the cocked gun. Savannah stood behind the small assembly, her gun trained on Gordy Soften. She had chosen the exact right target to threaten. The 2 men assaulting Maxim couldn't get their hands off him fast enough. At least she didn't say freeze, Maxim mused as Gordy's goons withdrew. He rubbed some of the circulation back into his biceps as he took in the developing scene. It shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone present that a Mafia girlfriend might be packing. He was surprised no one had considered his own backup before moving in. It was a mistake he was certain he would have never made during his time as head of security. "Phone," Maxim ordered Gordy, holding his hand open. The older man scowled before hanging up his call and passing the cell phone over. "Nice to have you back, Maxim," Gordy muttered. He signaled to his 2 security guards and turned to depart without a further word. The men in black exchanged uncertain glances before obediently falling into step behind their superior. Savannah didn't lower her gun until they were well out of sight. Then, with a sigh, she retracted her firearm and holstered it back inside a hidden compartment of her jacket. "Sorry to bust up the party," she mentioned. "Too many dicks on the dance floor," Maxim replied. She snorted, and the last of the moment's lingering tension diffused. He studied the phone in lieu of studying her. He wouldn't admit out loud how deeply impressed he was by her reaction time or how moved he was that she would readily put herself in danger for him. Men like Maxim weren't moved, and women like Savannah didn't come riding to the rescue of former thugs because they had hidden feelings for them. She had likely just been trying to avoid the mess that came with seeing her contact get slit open like an envelope. "None of those men seemed surprised that you resorted to violence to get what you want," Savannah mused. Maxim flipped open the phone and scrolled through the call history, saying nothing. "Guess I just got a sneak peek at knowing what the old Maxim must have been like." "Who's Rosa?" she inquired, craning closer. Maxim studied the caller ID for a long moment. He was looking at a list of calls made almost exclusively from the same number. "Not who," he corrected. "It's a what? A nightclub highly favored by the Russian Mafia." "I didn't take Mr. Soften for the sort of man who would frequent a nightclub," Savannah said. "Any chance of us getting in to snoop around a bit?" "I'll see if Rebecca can have a word with her father," Maxim replied, closing the phone and storing it in the pocket of his riding jacket to examine later. He had a feeling Savannah would want to look at it as well, but not before he got everything he needed from it. "Rebecca," she repeated in confusion. "Her father owns the club. If anyone could get us in, it's her." Maxim turned to discover Savannah was still standing close to him. He gazed down the length of his nose at her, and she returned his look easily, expectantly. It was one thing to say she trusted him. It was another to see it evidenced for himself. All he ever wanted to do when he looked at her looking at him like that was sweep her up in his arms and kiss her until she couldn't even find it in her to trust herself. That was how crazy this woman was starting to make him, and he had a creeping feeling it was only going to get worse the longer he knew her. "I won't tell her anything else," he continued finally. Becky already thinks I'm heading back into the Mafia and dragging you with me, so my request won't come as a surprise. She'll have some things to say about it, but she won't stop me." "I'm sorry you can't tell her the truth," Savannah murmured. She surprised him by reaching between them to take his hand in the fading light. He didn't think he imagined the look of regret that passed across her face quickly, and wondered if she wished she had mastered the impulse before giving into it. "When this is all over, I promise you can scapegoat me as much as you want to all your friends. Just tell them the task force blackmailed you." He said nothing. "But it's worth it, right?" she said cheerfully as they broke contact and started back toward his bike. "Aren't you glad I tagged along? I told you that you would need me." Maxim offered nothing in response to this. The ways he felt himself needing Savannah Casiero were climbing steadily by the hour. He mounted the Nighthawk, and she settled her much slighter weight in behind him, wrapping her slender arms around his waist. He was already getting used to having her on the back behind him. He was already getting used to her, period. There was a time when Maxim had been a regular at Rosa, but he hadn't so much as driven down the block in years. Now, as he parked the Hawk and helped Savannah off, he was surprised to find that he still recognized the bouncer standing guard outside the entrance to the club. He crossed the street, looping his arm through the arm of the woman at his side. The queue to get in wrapped around the building, but he didn't bother heading for the back of the line. Instead, he strode to the front, greeting the security guard with a silent nod of acknowledgement. The other's eyebrows lifted in faint surprise. His surprise was a lot less faint once he got a good look at Savannah. He raised the velvet rope without a word. Nobody at the front of the line dared speak up about the preferential treatment. All eyes were on the couple. "Well, that was easy," Savannah murmured as they passed across the threshold. "I assume Rebecca called ahead? They must have been expecting you." "I'm willing to bet you have something to do with it," Maxim replied as he steered her inside. Agent Casiero was wearing a slinky black number that just barely qualified as a dress. She had informed Maxim when he drove her home to change that anything colorful would only draw more unwanted attention to them, but he begged to differ on that point. His presence at Rosa was already likely to be noticed and talked about by every club-goer they encountered. Having a woman like Savannah on his arm would only raise the gossip factor. Savannah Casiero could have been wearing a burlap sack, and she would still be the most beautiful thing to enter the establishment that night. Her amber hair was lushly curled and piled along one shoulder, granting anyone looking a clear view of her new tattoo. Maxim had given her his riding jacket to wear to augment the visual that they were together. She deposited it at the coat check, slipping the burner phone out of the pocket at the last instant and passing it to Maxim. After some rigorous negotiation, she had agreed to leave her firearm at home. "Now what?" she asked. They stared out over the dark room, pulsing with lights, the walls shaking with the pounding rhythm of the bass. Together, they took in the swimming sea of faces. Maxim recognized many of them. He recognized the look of many more. Rosa was still mob territory in every sense of the word, and he had a feeling they would not come away disappointed this evening. There had to be someone here who knew more about his father's death, someone who was placing frequent calls to Gordy, and he intended to find out who. "I have a booth," Maxim said. "There, in the back." "It's occupied," Savannah noticed with wry amusement. She was right in her observation. A young man Maxim didn't recognize reclined in the booth with a scantily clad woman on each arm. The women Maxim did recognize, and potentially not to his credit. He made no remark in response, just moved off into the dark recesses of the club. Savannah followed, threading her arm once more through his. Maxim may not have recognized the man, but he knew he was recognized in turn. They approached at a stroll, and he watched the other man's alcohol-flushed face drain of color at the sight of him. He had often been on the receiving end of a visible fear response when he was the head of security. Now, he had a feeling the widely exaggerated reports of his involvement in his own father's murder probably had something to do with it. "Move." He considered it more an offering of advice than an order. The younger man hastened to comply, banging his knees conspicuously on the underside of the table as he got out. The two women lingered longer, as if uncertain whether Maxim's cool dismissal applied to them. One shared look at Savannah, and they slid out after their date, both tossing their hair and casting hopeful glances over their shoulders to see if Maxim would change his mind and invite them back. There was a time, not far removed from the present, when he wouldn't have ignored them the way he did now. Still, their coquettish departure did provide some inspiration. "There are people who will want to come by and pay their respects to me," he commented as they slid into the newly vacated booth. "Well, they won't necessarily want to pay their respects so much as ingratiate themselves with a Karev." The idea of a brown-noser had always tasted bitter on his tongue. He signaled a passing waitress for 2 shots, hoping to erase the sensation in his mouth. He knew of another way he could erase it, but the pair of lips he might have lost himself in were too busy currently forming clever retorts. "Who are you, the Godfather? And scoot over," Savannah instructed as she attempted to muscle her way into the seat beside him. The fact that she still thought she was calling the shots on his home turf amused Maxim. She jabbed with the sharp corner of one elbow, and he caught her arm, fingers wrapping around the toned bicep and yanking everything else attached down onto his knee. Savannah exhaled a startled gasp as she fell into his lap. His hands came up the next instant to hold her hips in place and ensure she didn't move away and break the illusion. "My woman wouldn't sit anywhere else," Maxim whispered, lips near enough to almost graze the shell of her ear. Savannah shivered against him. He drew back when the server returned and placed a row of shots in front of them. "This is kind of surreal to see," Savannah murmured as the waitress retreated hastily. She shifted in his lap as she reached for a drink, and Maxim stifled a groan in his throat. "Everyone we've encountered so far is either terrified of you or trying to get in your pants, and usually it feels like a little bit of both. Clearly they know something I don't." "You know enough," Maxim said, as Savannah plucked up another shot and ferried it his way. It felt like more than half the eyes in the club were currently trained on them, even though he had always favored this particular booth due to its darkness and privacy. "You know what I was in a past life." "Who you were," she corrected him. "And I know who you are now, Max. I can't imagine the man who made all these people afraid of him is any different than the one I've come to know." Maxim shifted her closer until she was sitting side saddle across his legs. He could feel the swell of her hip and breast pressing in against him. He tried to burn the moment, the sensation into his mind, knowing he might never get her this close again. "Thanks for the vote of confidence," he murmured. Was it his imagination, or did Savannah seem suddenly nervous to find herself in his arms? He watched the shallow rise and fall of her cleavage, and had trouble pulling himself away from his consideration of her breasts. "What I mean is, I get why you did what you did for so long," she said hastily. "You were protecting your family, protecting your own. It might surprise you to hear it, but I can understand that sort of motivation. I can respect it. I can even admire—" Her breath caught when she noticed the direction of his gaze, and Maxim watched as Savannah pulled her lower lip in between her teeth. "I can admire a man like you," she finished. "Things aren't black and white anymore. I wish they were. Take a shot with me," Maxim said. His voice was rough, his mouth ghosting across the downy soft hair of her temple. "Before we say and do things we both regret." He didn't want her talking to him like that. Didn't want it because he had no idea what was truth and what was fiction anymore. If Savannah struggled to color code good and evil, then Maxim struggled to know where to draw the line between fact and fabrication. If having every off-limits inch of her pressed this close to him wasn't helping his clarity, then maybe an attempt to chase his feelings with vodka would. They linked arms, tipped their heads, and threw back the shots in the same instant. 2 empty shot glasses rang hollowly on the table as the couple slammed them down with a thunk in the same instant. Maxim relished the burn in his throat, the warmth of the alcohol a welcome distraction from the heat of having her in his lap. He could feel himself starting to rise to the occasion, his erection stirring and stiffening beneath her. Savannah made a small noise of acknowledgement and tried to shift aside, but Maxim held her fast against him, burying his fingers in the silk, slick material of her dress and pressing hard into the skin beneath. He trained his own dark eyes on hers, and she didn't disappoint him by looking away. He wanted her to feel what she did to him. He wanted her to think twice before putting that wall up a third time. He thought the drink would make things easier, but he was wrong. Her mouth was wet and glistening, and the pulsing lights from the dance floor played in her dilated pupils. Was she aroused? He trailed his fingers up her thigh and slipped them beneath the hem of her dress. He was on his way to finding out. "Maxim!" A gregarious male voice interrupted them then, cutting his exploration short. Maxim let a low growl of frustration escape through his teeth as he retracted his hand. Savannah's own quickly came up to pull the edge of her dress back down over her thigh. "Excuse me, gentlemen, I have to powder my nose," Savannah said hastily as she slid from Maxim's lap and moved off from the booth. Maxim watched her slender body sway with hawk-like intensity until the man who had interrupted them came into focus and eclipsed his view. It was Rebecca's father, Vasily, the proprietor of the nightclub. Maxim saw that the older man was carrying another tray of shots, likely on the house. He turned to follow Savannah's quick exit as well, bushy eyebrows drawing together in puzzlement. "What? No introduction?" Vasily boomed in his thick Russian accent. "Rebecca has told me much about her. I can see that the rumors of her are not widely exaggerated. She is very beautiful." "She is. That's why I have to keep an eye on her." Maxim was already hauling himself out of the booth after her before he realized the dismissal might come off as rude, if not a little suspicious. He grabbed 2 of Vasily's offered shots and winked. "We both know what happened to the last woman I let out of my sight." "Duh! She found a better man than you!" Vasily laughed uproariously as he waved one gnarled, ring-laden hand. Go, get her! I want to meet this woman for myself!" Maxim nodded and moved off onto the pulsating, pounding dance floor of the club, adjusting himself discreetly as he went. He passed through the grinding, gyrating bodies, breaking apart couples with a single look. Soon enough, he had gained the hallway. He saw Savannah slip inside the woman's restroom and disappear. He downed one shot, then the next, planting them face down on an empty table in quick succession. Then he started down the hallway. 6. Savannah. Not good. This was definitely not good. "Pull it together, Casiero," Savannah hissed under her breath as she pushed her way into the bathroom. A gaggle of female clubgoers clustered around the sinks, passing around a tube of lipstick and laughing at something one of them said in Russian. One look at Savannah, and they packed up the party, striding past her to make a quick and collaborative exit. Or so she thought. They were right to run. She was a storm of sexual frustration with no thunder or lightning for an outlet. She made her way over to the still running tap and cupped her hands beneath the streaming faucet, collecting and splashing cold water on her face. It wasn't enough to make her mascara run, but maybe it would be enough to shock her back into reality. Maxim Karev is at best a Russian thug, and at worst, a suspect in an ongoing murder investigation. You're an FBI agent who sure as hell hasn't busted her ass for years at the academy, only to be derailed now. What she needed was a glass of wine and a cold shower to get her mind off the dark-haired, dark-eyed Karev. What she needed was a tangible lead, and fast, to assure her that the case was moving forward, and that she wasn't just burning time and federal dollars enjoying the proximity of a man who had no choice but to act close to her. As she turned away from her reflection, she was forced to acknowledge for the first time that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't her entrance that had inspired the other women to leave. Maxim filled the doorway to the women's washroom, his towering height and broad shoulders ensuring none would dare attempt to slide past him, and that went as much for entering as exiting. Savannah twisted the tap off and straightened, folding her arms beneath the ridiculous pronouncement her push-up bra made of her breasts. Breasts that Maxim couldn't bring himself to look away from earlier, she reminded herself. If it hadn't been for the appearance of the other man, She didn't know what might have happened between them had they been left alone for a second longer in that booth. "Did you get lost?" she asked, but thought the irony in her question lacked some of its usual bite. She hated the way her voice trembled as he strode toward her. "Maxim? What's the matter? Is everything—" He reached for her before she could think to move. His strong, proprietary fingers grasped her around her wrist. In the next moment, she was nearly yanked off her toothpick-thin heels as Maxim pulled her against him and crushed his mouth to hers. He tasted as sharp and heady and immediate as the top-shelf vodka they had been served already. Savannah wrapped her arms around his shoulders to stabilize herself, sampling as much as she could as he backed her against the wall. Her shoulders struck the tile, but the force of the blow hardly registered to her on a conscious level. She felt as if she was being devoured whole by the man she had secretly longed for, day and night. The man she couldn't allow herself to have, yet was having her anyway. She tried to muster up his name to speak it, to wake them both up like a splash of cold water delivered from the sink. But his lips were relentless. He kissed her as if he knew what she was about to say and do, and needed to silence her. And she found her willpower to refuse his advance, suddenly vanishing beneath the onslaught. She gripped the muscles that bulged in his back, desperate to know them as she had earlier that day. Clothing had to be the worst invention of the human race, she decided. She tugged at the collar of Maxim's shirt and managed to get it halfway up over his head before he pulled her away from the wall and herded her back into one of the bathroom stalls. She heard the door bang closed behind them, heard the latch shoot into place, but she was having trouble distinguishing how he did it when he had his hands full of her. She yanked his shirt over his head, freeing his dark curls and everything else that followed. The shirt dropped, and her stomach twisted with a desire so deep-seated it felt almost painful as his angular face came up to taste her again. They clashed in a tangle of lips and tongues and teeth, and Savannah brought her hands up between them, desperate to explore every newly bared inch of him. Maxim's body was as smooth and hard as marble beneath her questing touches. She could hardly believe the man was real. There was scarcely enough room to accommodate them both inside the stall, and Savannah soon found herself shoved back against the wall again out of necessity. She could not find it in her to care about the time or place this was finally happening. All she cared about was that Maxim had finally given his hands free rein to explore every inch of her.
Sorry, readers. Here's where we fade to black due to YouTube explicit content guidelines. If you dream for the steam, you'll need to take a look in the book.
Anyone could walk in at any moment. Maybe they already had, and Savannah had been too preoccupied with the Russian thug ravishing her to the boundaries of her senses to notice. This was not how an undercover FBI agent conducted herself. But even if there was someone in the bathroom here with them, no one from the task force she was assigned to would witness her fall from grace. She was putty in his hands, as malleable as she was surprisingly reactive. If he was going to have her here and now, then she was going to have him. She wasn't going to fall so much as willfully plunge over the cliff of her sense of morality, leaving her gun and badge and better sense behind her.
Sorry, readers. Here's where we fade to black due to YouTube explicit content guidelines. If you dream for the steam, you'll need to take a look in the book.
That was all part of our cover, Maxim breathed as he drew back. Savannah said nothing. They both knew this went way, way beyond the pale. What was there to prove by doing what they did? Who was there to even know what they had done together just now? No, they had to keep what they had done between them or risk losing everything to this chaotic, animalist burst of lust. Maxim zipped up his fly, snatched his shirt, and banged his way out of the bathroom stall as Savannah bent hastily to gather her own flimsy things together. Her worst fears remained unrealized. There was no one else in the bathroom there with them. Likely any woman needing to use the toilet had turned and sought accommodations elsewhere when confronted with the universal sound of a couple getting it on. Savannah addressed, noting that her face was flushed almost beyond recognition when she looked in the mirror. She did not blush. Then again, there were a lot of things she had sworn she did not do until this evening. She rearranged her appearance as best she could before exiting out the bathroom after Maxim. Out on the dance floor, she realized her date was nowhere to be found. The booth toward the back remained empty, and after a cursory peek into the men's bathroom, she realized with a sinking feeling that he was nowhere on the club's premises. She went outside and was unsurprised to discover that the Nighthawk was gone. Unsurprised, but furious. Had Maxim jumped her to try and throw her off whatever plan he had in store? Had he actually succeeded? Damn it, Savannah swore below her breath as she held for a cab. He couldn't have gotten far, and she would find him. Only one question remained then. What was it that had called him away? The cell phone, she realized. It had buzzed in his pocket and received a text while they were holed up together in the bathroom. Maxim was gone, and so was Gordy Soffin's cell phone. 7. Maxim. He may have had his share of hookups in his past life as head of security, but Maxim had never been one to take a woman he wanted so immediately and recklessly. He hadn't intended to leave Savannah alone back at Rosa, but he needed to clear his head. The woman could look after herself, she had proven that much time and again, and he needed to immediately follow up on this latest lead. It was better for them both if she stayed put. Maxim pulled the Nighthawk up at the next stoplight and fished Gordy's burner from his back pocket. The message read, 6101 East Lansing. Answers here. It was worded too oddly and the timing too coincidental for it to be anything but a message for him. Maxim's fingers clenched over the phone, only for a moment. Then a green cast from the traffic light above told him it was time to move again. He pocketed the burner and kicked the Hawk back to life, tearing off down the street toward Lansing. Everyone on the block was either at Rosa or had already gone to bed for the evening. The lone wolf rode alone. And yet he wasn't alone. God, he could still smell her on him. He shook his head, trying to clear her from his mind, but she just kept coming back again and again. Savannah Casillero had installed a mental trapdoor in his brain, and having sex with her had only exacerbated the problem. It hadn't driven her from his bloodstream. It had made him crave her even more than before, if such a thing was possible, and he was steadily being led to believe that it was. His feelings for her were more than feelings of physical attraction. Even something as basic as lust would have been surmountable at this point, but now he couldn't focus for thoughts of her. He was in deep shit already. He may as well try to close the evening with some sort of clarity, and if that meant riding out alone to confront answers about his father's killer, then so be it. It was dark on Lansing Street. Maxim pulled up outside the address, a 2-story apartment block that couldn't have housed more than 5 or 6 tenants in all, and noticed that the streetlight was out. He shut off his bike and wheeled it up the drive, conscious of the gravel crunching beneath his boots. He didn't bother stepping lightly. He knew he was expected. He parked the Hawk and started up the steps to the address. Nothing greeted him, not a person, not a porch light. He ignored the mental alarm ringing in the back of his head. He had been in plenty of situations that set it off before and gotten himself out of plenty more, alone. Still, he couldn't help wishing that Savannah was here with him. I'm not leaving until I have answers, he reminded himself as he pulled his fist back and hammered on the front of the apartment. The door jumped in its frame and eased open beneath his hand with an ominous creak to reveal a darkened living room. Even after riding all the way over through a mostly uninterrupted night, Maxim's vision wasn't prepared for this. He stepped carefully over the threshold and ran his hand along the wall, pausing only briefly when he located the light switch. He flipped it on. The room was suddenly bathed in light. and he could now see it was also bathed in blood. He made no noise. He didn't so much as blink or flinch as the full horror of the scene sank in around him. A man's body lay on the floor in a sickening heap, a puddle of fresh red blood blooming out around him, leaching into the carpet and likely already dripping down into the neighbor's apartment below. There was gore splashed on the wall behind him as well, and heavy clumps of it clung to pieces of the man's spare furniture. This had happened recently then. The apartment's tenant had been murdered that night, and likely within the last hour. Maxim studied the brutality of the crime scene, accepted it, kept any emotion carefully bottled up and isolated away from his logic center. Then he moved carefully across the room to the lone desk pushed back against the wall. There were papers strewn about everywhere, scattered documents coded in numeric ciphers. Occasionally he spotted what appeared to be contracts signed and dated in Russian. He wished it wasn't all so familiar. Maxim? Maxim whirled, his heart flying into his throat. Savannah stood in the doorway, wide eyes drinking in the scene before her. He saw her hand drop to her side, only to come up frighteningly, desperately short of discovering a firearm there. "What the hell are you doing here, Savannah?" His voice cracked on the air like a shot. Her gaze leapt to him. I followed you. In a cab." He was startled to find tears leaking from the edges of her eyes. "Did you do this, Maxim? How? "That man is a hitman," he stated. "You'll have a hard time nailing him down in your database, but I'm betting it's all there if you dig deep enough." "Did you know him?" Savannah whispered. "I've known men like him, and I've seen this before." Maxim gesticulated to the horror show they were being forced to act in now. "This man was assassinated, Savannah, likely in the moments before I got here. Whoever's responsible is long gone. I have a feeling I'm being set up." As if to confirm his theory, the lone wail of a distant siren rent the air. Savannah gave a small start. Soon another took up the call, and then another, until Maxim was certain an entire pack of squad cars was closing in around them. They likely had only moments before the entire place was swarming with cops. "I didn't call them," Savannah choked, fighting back whatever emotion threatened to take hold of her. "God damn it, but I should have called them. Maxim, this is... How am I supposed to believe you had no part in this?" "Didn't you say you know the man I am now?" he said tersely. He stepped over the victim's body and went to her. Savannah drew back, but there was nowhere else to retreat. He had her by the shoulders before she could back her way out of the front door. "Savannah!" He wanted to shake her, but he refrained. It was all too much for him to handle any more. He thought he could go it alone. He thought he could weather the accusations of his father's murder. But this, seeing the face of the woman "Go. Out the back. We have to get out of here, both of us." Savannah spoke to him in stilted orders, and Maxim was all too happy to comply. He grabbed her by the hand and pulled her after him, navigating the expanding lake of red as he spirited them both out onto the back porch. They took the stairs quickly, hugging the shadows as the distant sirens drew closer. "I'll get us out of here," he said. "I parked around back away from the road. We'll take my hawk and drive as far from here as possible. You'll take me home," Savannah stated. "And you'll give me the phone. In fact, you'll give it to me now." Maxim stopped short and turned. Savannah stood rigid at the bottom of the stairs. He knew she wouldn't come with him if he didn't comply. He would run, and she would stay and rejoin the task force. They would turn her against him, and she would hunt him to the ends of the earth if he allowed the night to end this way. He had to do as she said. He withdrew the phone from his pocket and passed it to her. Savannah secreted it inside her jacket, the one she had worn into Rosa that evening, the one he had left behind him at the club, and they moved off together toward his bike. He would find a way out of this. He had to. Even though she piled on back behind him, he could tell it was an effort for her to bring herself to wrap her arms around his waist, as if she was repelled by him, as if she didn't know what to think of him. For the first time, Maxim suspected Savannah might be a little frightened of him, and the thought of her fearing him threatened to drive him to insanity. He would find a way to clear his name and win her back, he vowed as he cranked the Nighthawk to life, and they pulled away into the darkness. He just had no fucking idea of where to start. 8. Split. You really stepped in it this time, Casiero. Savannah stared hard at her computer screen. Then, after a calculated moment, she slid her rolling chair out from behind her console and glared across the room. She tried to imagine the intensity of her look could cut Agent Tom Andrews with an edge as honed as the one on her new sword tattoo. Whatever you're smelling, Andrews, I'm pretty sure it's not me. Tom Andrews stood behind his desk, mopping the sweat that dripped down from the dome of his head and onto his brow with a hand towel. He had just arrived at the office. He still hadn't changed out of his running gear, but it was early. Aside from the security guard who had greeted Savannah on her way in, it was likely that the two of them were the only ones in the building. You still think your boyfriend isn't involved in all this? Tom retired the towel over one shoulder and leaned back against his desk, gazing at her incredulously. Wake up, Savannah. He's a son of the mob, for fuck's sake. You better believe the lab's gonna find his prints all over my crime scene. Not yours, asshole. I was there first. Savannah said nothing out loud, only rolled back behind her computer, if only to screen her expression from Tom. He could be abnormally dense for someone on the Blood Diamond Task Force, but his confidence about the case troubled her. Maxim had been smart enough not to touch anything at the scene, right? And if he really was the killer— No, she interrupted her own thoughts vehemently. She had let him out of her sight for only an instant. There was no way his escape from Rosa had bought him enough time to wreak that much damage on someone. Right? Then again, Maxim was a self-described retired killer. Who knew what he was capable of, much less who had trained him or how? There was a list of names in his file, of course, longtime associates of his father from various backgrounds and disciplines. But at the end of the day, Savannah had to resign herself to the fact that she had no idea what Maxim was capable of. She just had to trust him. Trust that the intensity of the pull she felt toward him wasn't clouding her better sense. Easier said than done. Fortunately, her loud-mouthed colleague had satisfied himself by saying enough for the both of them. She glanced up as Tom exited, likely to go change out of his clothes in the locker room. Once she was reassured she was alone, Savannah slid her desk drawer open and pulled out Gordy Soffin's burner phone, turning it repeatedly in her hand. She had confiscated it from Maxim, only to discover upon her return home that the device was completely wiped, either by the Russian's own hand or the process had been done remotely by an unknown player. Not even the task force's advanced equipment could recover what was on it. It was just another piece to the puzzle that had been lost along the way. She flipped it again, glaring at the dead screen before tossing it into the waste bin with a sigh. There were no prints to be found on it, outside of Gordy's, Maxim's, and now her own. She had a feeling someone had wanted the phone planted on Maxim via Soffin. Someone had banked on it, in fact, and lured Maxim to the crime scene as a setup. The problem was, her gut instincts were all she had to go on at this point. Either that same someone had engaged a kill switch from afar and fried the phone, or Maxim had managed to wipe it himself. A timeline that would have had to align exactly with the hitman's murder, Savannah reminded herself. If Maxim was the murderer, she thought it unlikely that he would have prioritized destroying any cellular data over cleaning up the grisly mess she had discovered him knee-deep in at the scene. It just didn't make sense. But couldn't she be wrong? She had already let her attraction to her only real suspect in the case get the better of her. Now, she risked being taken for more than one kind of a ride by Maxim Karev. Savannah swallowed a growl of frustration and only barely resisted the urge to drop her head onto her keyboard and give up for the day. A glance at her desktop clock told her it was only a little past 7 in the morning. She had been working overtime on this Sergei case, if only because the more hours she put into it, the more time she got to spend pretending to be a suspected murderer's girlfriend. What was wrong with her? She was just about to haul herself out of her chair and put on another pot of coffee in the lounge when a solicitous ping from her computer called her back. Savannah alighted once more in her chair and clicked open the messenger window. She already knew who it was. Madison. Everything okay? I haven't heard from you in a few weeks. Savannah. I texted you yesterday. Madison. Nothing significant. So why don't you tell me what the hell is going on with you, Annie? Leave it to Madison O'Connor to intuitively know something was up. Savannah sat back in her chair, pulling her hands away from the keyboard to rub her temples. Savannah. Savannah. I'm a little in over my head here with a case. Madison. A case? Uh-huh. Madison. This wouldn't have anything to do with a certain member of a certain family you warned me against, would it, Agent Hypocrite? Maddie. Savannah stressed aloud between her teeth. She'd always been careful with the privacy settings on her work computer. But who was she kidding? This was the Federal Bureau of Investigation she worked for. If they wanted to keep tabs on her communications, they had likely already found a way. Savannah. Can't talk right now. We'll go for drinks soon, I promise. Madison. Fine. Have you heard of this new place called Paint and Pint? It's getting rave reviews online. Savannah. It's underrated. Trust me. I'll call you later. Savannah clicked out of her messenger client, severing her connection with the only person on Earth who stood a chance of understanding what she was going through. Not only was Madison expecting a child with Maxim's brother, Vlad, something Savannah had yet to reveal to Maxim, but Maddie was the only person close to her that Savannah trusted implicitly. Generally, she refrained from relating the details of any of her cases to Maddie. But she had already checked all remaining professionalism at the door when she had had sex with Maxim. She was going to have to break it off with him, she knew. Maybe have herself transferred to another part of the task force. She had fought tooth and nail to go undercover, but she had never expected to get so tangled up with the dangerous man she had trusted to watch her back. It was time to end it. She just wished it didn't feel so much like the decision threw a kill switch on her heart. I just ran into the director in the hallway. Savannah raised her eyes, startled to find Tom had returned without her noticing. He was wearing a suit and sunglasses, leaning with one shoulder propped in the doorway to their shared office. An anonymous source claiming to be an eyewitness called it in last night. Says they saw someone fitting your boyfriend's description entering the victim's apartment building. Savannah took a moment to process what he was saying. Really? And that's all they reported? She asked him. No argument, no gunshot, or mention of a second suspect arriving on the scene? Apparently they cut the call before we can get anything more out of them, Tom replied. Strange. There should have been more to it, and Savannah felt certain of the fact. It had also been dark outside the apartment building when she arrived, owing to the main streetlight being out. She could recall that eerie detail very vividly. Whoever had called in and described Maxim as the suspect, she was certain, was lying. What's more, it was possible that the person the director had on the phone was the real killer. I'm going to bring Karev in this afternoon, Tom interrupted her thoughts, on suspicion of murder. 2 counts. He forked 2 of his fingers and presented them to her, wiggling them smugly, as if he was the older kid in grade school boasting about how high he could count. It was this kind of casual condescension that normally drove Savannah up a wall, but she was too busy. You want to bring him in for Sergei too? She guessed. The director thinks he has enough on him, or at least suspects he'll find more evidence? Don't always have to locate the proof, if you know what I mean. Tom's pale eyes glimmered. Savannah had a feeling he was trying to convey a message to her telepathically. A message she wasn't certain she wanted to receive. We both know this guy's our only bead on closing this murder investigation down and focusing our attention elsewhere. We're the Blood Diamond Task Force, remember? You ask me, the sooner we nail every last one of the Karevs, the sooner we can get back to doing our jobs. What's a little planted evidence between friends, I ask you? So that's what he was thinking. You make me sick, Andrews, she wanted to say. Scratch that. She wanted to pluck her pen off her desk, uncap it, and hurl it with ninja-like precision right at his hairless, arrogant face. Whatever side of the law they happened to be born on, human lives weren't to be trifled with like this. She wore a badge for a reason, and so did he, goddammit. Maybe she wasn't the one who had lost sight of what that meant after all. "Any idea where I might find my man?" "Sorry, your man?" he asked her. "More than an idea." Savannah rose and snatched up her navy blue field coat. No way in hell was she letting a shark like Tom Andrews bring Maxim in without her. She was going to oversee every single detail of the arrest and ensure that nothing suspicious occurred on their end. "Never thought I'd be watching my own people this closely," she reflected as they exited for the garage and piled into the squad car. She could only hope Maxim would forgive her for whatever she was about to do. The only right way to get out from underneath a woman was to get under a bike, so far as Maxim was concerned. At least that was how it used to work. He might not have believed it a year ago, but his pre-Savannah world had been much simpler. Now it wasn't just his own family out to get him, but the woman he cared for the most. She had snuck him out of a crime scene, sure, but he knew it was only a matter of time before her sense of justice got the better of her and she came for him. What else was there for her to do but bring him in? And he wouldn't blame her, he decided as he wiped his hands clean on his jeans and rolled out from underneath the Ural sidecar. Travis, perhaps sensing his best and only employee's distracted state of mind, had tasked him with a fairly simple attachment procedure today. Unfortunately for them both, Maxim had still managed to complete it in record time, and now he had to look elsewhere for work. He stood up and wiped the oil rag down the door of the car. Out back, he could hear Rebecca's light-hearted laugh bubble up as she stole a moment away from the desk with Travis. Maxim gazed at the Ural blandly. He moved away from it eventually to plumb the depths of the fridge and came away with a Budweiser. He sighed, popping it open beneath the workbench and leaning back to consider his work. He raised the bottle to his lips and took a tentative sip, before drawing it away again with a wince. The beer was flat and tasted about as terrible as it looked. He tried to distract himself from thoughts of the bloody room, the bent and broken body, with thoughts of Savannah, but it only made him feel 1,000,000 times worse. He imagined her reaction to him suggesting she ride in the sidecar and they take the town together, and a ghost of a smile threatened to haunt the severe line of his lips. He wondered again what his father would think of his prodigal son's born-again choice in women. Savannah and Sergei would not have gotten along, he decided, as he turned back to the open front of the garage. Savannah Casillero stood in the open mouth of the garage, looking more beautiful than she had a right to. Her multicolored hair was down, framing a naturally radiant face devoid of makeup. She was wearing a thick windbreaker several sizes too large, but it only served to make her look more petite than she already was. Maxim blinked. He set his beer down. "Didn't expect to see you again anytime soon," he admitted. "Maxim." He disliked the way she said his name just then. Her voice sounded like it was strung too tight, like she was bypassing what she really wanted to say to him and keeping the truth lodged in her throat. "You're not here to ask for another date," he guessed. Savannah's eyes shifted to the side, and Maxim craned to look past her shoulder out toward the lot. He saw a car idling behind her. He hadn't heard it pull up over the noise blaring from the stereo. He reached across the bench to dial it down as Savannah took a step further into the garage. "It's Andrews. Someone called in a tip to the FBI, and he has orders to bring you in." "His orders are your orders," Maxim said. Savannah winced at his words, and it almost looked like she would have pulled a face then if the situation wasn't so serious. "I chose to ride along with him today, and I convinced him to let me have a word with you alone," she added. "I told him I'd be able to talk you into coming in peacefully. I didn't realize you'd be drinking, of course. You can finish your beer if you want." Savannah winced again. "You're drinking Budweiser." "I take it back. Get on the ground. I'm taking you by excessive force." "Don't be surprised if I use excessive force in kind." He hated how easy it was to regain a smile in her presence. The length of the garage stretched between them, and Maxim knew in his heart what that space meant. This intangible, unnameable thing between them was as good as over. She was giving him a moment to finish his drink, but all he really wanted was a moment to find closure. He was going with her, and who knew when he would return again to slick cycles, to the hammersmiths, to the life outside of the mob that he had fought for years to forge for himself. It was all about to end, and all he wanted was one more moment with the world-ender herself. "And who's your other friend?" he asked. When Savannah's face registered confusion, Maxim nodded to the unmarked car pulling up alongside her vehicle. She turned just as the recent arrival rolled its back window down. They realized what was about to happen the instant before it happened. "Tom!" Savannah screamed. Maxim saw the figure behind the steering wheel duck in his seat as the second car opened fire. The driver's side window shattered in an eruption of jagged, fanged glass. He had made every effort to leave his old life behind him. Now it seemed to all be coming back to haunt him with a nightmarish vengeance. He wasn't disappointed to find that now that imminent peril had returned, so had his reflexes. 3 bounding leaps carried him across the garage. He grabbed Savannah's arm, practically yanking her off her feet as another round began to pop off. He dragged her out of harm's way, back beneath the workbench that lined the wall. "God damn it," he muttered. The Ural was all shot to shit. What's more, the panel to close the garage door was located outside the office and directly across the wall from them. They didn't have a lot of room to work with. He tried to tug Savannah closer so he could trade spots with her and force her behind him, closer to the wall. But she refused to budge. Typical. "The Blood Diamond Task Force can't afford to install fucking bulletproof glass in their cars?" Maxim shouted above the bedlam. On the subject of blood, he noticed that a telltale spray across the assaulted vehicle's windscreen was noticeably missing. "I didn't even know they were following us. I didn't even see them," Savannah gasped, drawing her firearm and peering out from around the side of the garage. Maxim grabbed her and hauled her back as another spray of bullets ripped apart the back wall of the garage. "I think we need to start entertaining the notion that you weren't being followed because maybe they weren't after you. Likely whoever called in your little tip didn't trust you to hold me to their satisfaction." "Shit," Maxim cursed below his breath. Thank God Travis was out back, and thank God he was with Rebecca. Rebecca was born into the same world Maxim had been born into, and she would know the sound of gunfire when she heard it. She would take care of her own before she risked checking in on Maxim, but he knew the time would come when she would risk it. He probably had less than a minute to work out a solution. Thankfully, it looked like he wouldn't have to do it alone. "Tom!" Savannah exclaimed fiercely. She was peering around the corner again. This time, when Maxim attempted to drag her back, she shook him off her. "He survived. He's out there, behind the car." Maxim finally gave up trying to get her to obey him and glanced over her head. "Obviously, he's not going to survive for long," he said. He needed Savannah to focus. The life of Agent Andrews was hardly as important to him as... "We need to get him," Savannah hissed. Maxim swore he could see flames of war dancing in her eyes. "I know he wanted to frame you. I sure as hell didn't know that. But he's the closest thing I have to a partner, goddammit. I may not like him most days, but that doesn't mean I want to see him shot full of holes. Very often." She amended her statement in the same wild tone of voice. "I have to go out there and get him." "Fine. We rescue Tom on 2 conditions." Maxim grabbed her face and held her gaze. Savannah didn't bat an eye at this treatment and didn't so much as look away from him when an answering hail of bullets sounded from Tom's side of the car. "You give me your gun, and you let me go out there. You can say I knocked you out and took it if you have to." "Absolutely out of the question." "Don't think I won't knock you out, Casiero," he warned. Her eyes narrowed. She studied him intently, as if she wasn't sure which iteration of the Russian she was dealing with. Finally, she handed him her gun with an angry exhale. "What's your other condition, Karev? And it better not be as completely idiotic as your first." "I'm the closest thing you have to a partner," he said, "because I am your partner for however much time we have left." "Don't die on me," she whispered, "and definitely don't tell anyone I said that." Maxim cupped her chin, leaned in, and kissed her passionately. Then he pushed her down beneath him as he rose, gun cocked and ready. "No promises," he said. He bolted out into the open, leveling his arm to fire. 2 shots, and he managed to take out both gunmen in the back seat as he slid into the space beside the stranded agent. He heard the tires of the unmarked car churn wildly. Whoever they were, they hadn't expected him to fight back. They were retreating, but they could run as far and as fast as they wanted. He would find them. And when he did... "Keep your head down, asshole," Maxim growled. Agent Andrews, to his one and only credit, did as he was told. Savannah had had just about enough of unmarked black vehicles for one day. That didn't appear to stop the Bureau from sending out an inordinate number of cars, license plate bearing and otherwise, to the scene of the day's shootout. She stood back, side by side with Maxim, scanning over the sea of exhaust fumes and swirling lights. Men and women clad in every uniform imaginable walked purposefully between cars, exchanging information and double-checking the stories of eyewitnesses. Tom Andrews was currently held up by the ambulance, but his uncleared status didn't prevent him from shooting frequent looks over his shoulder at Maxim and Savannah. She could practically hear the gears turning in his head as the agent tried to work out exactly how much credit he owed the man he still intended to arrest. She heard Maxim's quiet, amused snort beside her and knew that he was noticing the same thing. "You know what happens next," she said in a low voice. "You find a way to put all the blame for this on me and give me a pair of pretty bracelets to wear," Maxim guessed. "You know, I'm almost getting used to being your patsy. Still not used to driving with the taillight out, though." "I'll look into it," Savannah promised. "Who knows? By the time you get out of jail, you might just find one magically installed." "Don't know if I'll be getting out this time," Maxim admitted. Savannah cut an abrupt look his way, trying to read his expression to no avail. Was that resignation she detected in his tone? No way. It was unacceptable to give up now, especially when the department owed him a rare debt. Didn't he see that? "You're not taking the fall for this. I won't let you," she said. "And I promise that doesn't mean either of your brothers will get picked up as a result." "Maxim, look at me." He did, turned to gaze down his strong, handsome nose at her. Savannah was a woman who prided herself in her steel, her resolve. But seeing Maxim offer her a glimpse now into his private turmoil was almost enough to undo her. "You believe me, don't you?" she stressed. "Da." The handsome lines of his face flexed in a weak grin. It was something she could work with, at least. "But if this is how the day ends, I'd rather you be the one to do it." She thought she knew what he meant. Tom was shooting another fervent look their way, and it looked as if the paramedics were getting annoyed enough with his uncooperative attitude to dismiss him. Savannah reached into her back pocket and unhooked her handcuffs. Maxim turned away from her, offering up his wrists without a word. She clapped the cuffs on him and secured them, running the pad of her thumb along one of the pronounced veins in his wrist to let him know how close she was. "I'm not going anywhere," she promised. "I'm your woman on the inside now. Your fight is mine. We do this together, all right? No more flying solo, and definitely no more risking your life for me. We're partners now." "I'm in love with you, Savannah." Savannah felt her throat clench and her eyes flutter at his admission. Any potential response she had been busy concocting flew from her mind as she gazed into Maxim's dark, earnest eyes. She wanted to fall into them as much as she wanted to fall into his arms. She wanted to wrap herself in the words she had heard before, but never once allowed herself to believe. Lovers had breezed in and out of her life, but none had ever made her soar the way Maxim did now as he held her with a single, enduring look. She didn't need to pretend she hadn't heard him correctly. She didn't need to ask him to repeat what he had just said. It was the only confession that mattered to her. And she was determined that it would be enough to set him free. "I'm going to get you out of this, Karev." "I know," he murmured. "I trust you." In the distance, Savannah could see Travis and Rebecca Hammersmith hovering in the doorway to slick cycles and clutching one another. Thankfully, neither appeared to be hurt. As Travis spoke to one of the medics, Rebecca's eyes sought them out in the crowded parking lot and fixated on them. She frowned in confusion, arching an eyebrow at Savannah's FBI getup. But before anything could be conveyed between them, Agent Andrews stepped back into view. "All right." He both looked and sounded shaken, but the skin around his eyes clenched as he summoned his resolve. "I've still got a job to do, and I'm still taking you in. Move it, Karev," he ordered. Savannah moved first. Before Tom could say or do anything else to spoil the moment, she rocked forward on her toes and grasped Maxim's face between her hands. She smoothed her fingers through the overgrowth of stubble that shadowed his chiseled jaw, relishing a last, stolen moment together. Then, in full view of everyone watching, she raised herself up to meet him. Maxim leaned forward, bowing his head in submission. Their lips met, soft and warm and wonderfully alive. Savannah smiled into the kiss and thought she could hear Rebecca let out a cheer in the distance. Closer to home, she heard Tom Andrews mutter an oath of disbelief, but he did nothing immediate to break them apart. Only when she allowed her lips to linger longer than was strictly necessary and ran her hand suggestively along the angle of Maxim's jaw. Only when the Russian shifted his body close enough to brush against the front of hers. Only then did Agent Andrews grab for the arm of his suspect and pull him back. "Jesus, all right. Break it up, you two," Tom ordered. Savannah rocked back and planted herself once more, watching as another enforcer steered her lawless lover away from her. Maxim cast a hooded look over his shoulder, letting her know in no uncertain terms just what he intended to do to her once he was released from custody. Now it was up to her to ensure he could make good on his silent promise. Epilogue. Maxim. For the second time in as many months, Maxim Karev found himself behind bars. He leaned against the front of his cell, forearms dangling loosely through the iron slats of his cage, watching Savannah Casillero yell at her supervisor through the viewing window into the other room. Nothing much had changed, he reflected, except the depth of his relationship with the woman it was against every rule for him to want. He took in the scene before him now, watching it play out as if viewing a favorite television show on mute. The leading woman, a sexy, intrepid underling, taking her older male boss to task. Savannah waved her arms, pointed vehemently, contorted her lovely face in fury, and flashed her pearl-white teeth, trading smiles with angry grimaces in rapid succession. Her hair was pulled back from her face in a tight, controlled ponytail, although Maxim noticed a few curls had sprung loose over the course of her argument with the director. He thought he had never been more in love with her than he was in that moment. "I might just wind up married to the future head of the FBI," he mused as he watched Savannah wheel away from the discussion suddenly and slam back through the door to the block. "Sergei is probably turning over in his grave. Good. The old man can sleep as lightly as the rest of his sons until we manage to bring his killer to justice." "Good news," she said as she approached his holding cell. Maxim backed off from the bars a bit, only far enough to grasp them in his hands and lean into the space that Savannah would soon occupy. She stopped short in front of him, arms crossed loosely over her breasts. Her face was close enough to his that no one watching could mistake them for being anything less than intimate. "How much did you tell them?" Maxim asked curiously, but Savannah dismissed his question with a shake of her head. "All charges against you have been dropped, but there's a caveat. We want you on board as an official FBI consultant." She shifted her weight to one hip as she waited his response. It amused Maxim that Savannah wanted to negotiate without first letting him out of his cell. "My first priority is still finding my father's killer," he reminded her. "I won't stop until he's brought to justice." "Federal justice," she emphasized. "I can't have you running around delivering the mob's justice anymore, Maxim. Not if I'm going to stay by your side." "Guess my sword is making the rules now," he mused as Savannah flashed her keycard. The door that separated them slid open. "Wow, that might be the nerdiest thing I've ever heard you say," she replied. The mouth he knew so well twisted in a secret, genuine smile. He stepped to her, heedless of who might be watching. Whenever Savannah was within his grasp, upholding an image took a back seat. He was more than tired of pretending their relationship existed as something it wasn't. He raised his hand and smoothed it along the back of her exposed neck, stroking the tattoo that would forever tie her to him. "Calling you mine. It's only the truth," he murmured. He was surprised when Savannah didn't bat his hand away. She arched her neck a little instead, allowing her eyes to slip closed as the two exchanged a very public moment of bliss. "To answer your earlier question, "The director is aware of our relationship," Savannah replied. She reached up to tangle her fingers with his, pulling his hand away and clutching it resolutely at her side. "He doesn't approve of it." "So I noticed." Savannah's boss was standing in the glass window with his arms crossed, glowering at the two of them as if he wasn't sure who he disapproved of more. If Savannah noticed their audience, she pretended not to. She swung their joined hands a little as they walked down the hallway toward the exit. Maxim tried to fight the amused smile tugging at the edges of his mouth. He had never known her to be so carefree with her displays of affection, and he had a feeling she was rubbing her victory in now. Let her rub it in, and let him be her willing prize. Maxim couldn't care less what others thought of their unlikely union. When he gazed down at the woman striding confidently at his side, he couldn't think of a place he would rather be. As someone who continued to struggle with the darkness of his past and even the uncertainty of his present, it was incredible to see his future manifested in the beautiful and capable Savannah Casiero. He was a better man already for having her in his life, and no matter what happened, he was going to make sure she stayed right here. This has been Her Rogue Russian, Karev Brothers Book 2, written by Leslie North, read by D.C. Cole. Copyright 2017 by Relay Publishing. Production copyright 2017 by Relay Publishing.